welcome to the afternoon meeting for July 8th, 2015 of the Portland City Council. Would you please call the roll?
Saltzman,
Here.
Novick, Fritz,
Here.
Fish,
Here.
Hales.
Here. Welcome, everyone. We have a time-certain item that we're going to take up now, which is item 752.
Adopt the citywide racial equity goals and strategies as presented by the Office of Equity and Human Rights to guide city policies, plans, and procedures.
Welcome, everyone. I want to call on our director, Dante James, and his staff to come present this item and get this discussion started. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, hope you're enjoying the sunshine and the warm weather. I am really pleased today to be here with my staff and community members to present to you a set of racial equity goals for the City of Portland. I'm asking for the adoption of these goals specifically as city policy to be used as a guidepost and policy driver for city leadership and city employees. These goals can and should be used as the point of focus to create action items and metrics, as well as a means of accountability toward equity in this city. These goals are designed to encompass the overall work of the City of Portland, from hiring to service delivery. We must be vigilant to ensure that institutional racism or just a lack of cultural consciousness is not behind the decisions that we make, the people who we hire, the people we promote, the sewer pipes we repair, the neighborhoods we change our streetlights, or the people we stop and frisk. These will coincide with each of the Bureau's work on their equity roadmap, the Bureau's strategic equity plans. These can be used with the budget tool. These can be used in conjunction with PIAC and community outreach and engagement. These can be used with the new Commission on Social Equity and Contracting. These can be used across bureaus. Where'd I go? Sorry. So, going to the goals, what in fact are they? Equity goal number 1. We will end racial disparities within city government so there is fairness in hiring and promotions, greater opportunities in contracting, and equitable services to all residents. Goal number 2. We will strengthen outreach, public engagement, and access to city services for communities of color and immigrant and refugee communities, and support or change existing services using racial equity best practices. Equity goal number 3. We will collaborate with communities and institutions to eliminate racial inequity in all areas of government, including education, criminal justice, environmental justice, health, housing, transportation, and economic success. And those are the 3 goals, short and sweet, which encompass a lot. And we're asking that you really take these into consideration in how you can use them for your bureaus, for your bureau leadership. And so my presentation today is not to sit here and re-examine all the reasons why the Office of Equity exists, the statistics and the community's engagement that brought this office to fruition, and the disparities, the huge disparities that exist across communities of color. This effort is focused on creating some very specific guideposts within which the city can work as a concrete goal toward achieving equity for all residents. And as and Portland is a regional and it's a national leader in doing this work. Unbeknownst to many, many people, and interestingly enough, Portland is absolutely a regional and national leader in doing this work. From Tacoma, Washington, to Oakland, California, Fairfax County, Virginia, Madison, Wisconsin, Fort Wayne, Indiana. These cities and their leadership are watching what we do, and they are absolutely emulating our work. And I can specifically tell you that Tacoma, Washington, has an office that it created in December that is modeled on the Office of Equity and Human Rights in the City of Portland. I've been up there, their staff has been down here, and they are doing this work very similar to how we're doing it. I spent lots of time on the phone and actually in meeting with a city councilwoman from the city of Oakland, which just passed, just 3 weeks ago, creation of an Office of Equity in the city of Oakland. And I turned her job offer down, just so you know.
Good.
So we are absolutely a leader in doing this work, absolutely. And so by implementing these goals, we can continue to be a leader in this work. And so before delving even deeper into the strategies and these goals, there's a video I want to show. And the following video presents the faces and voices of those who are impacted by equity and inequity, and the faces and voices of those who believe that equity does in fact matter.
I experience racism every day. I'm not hyper aware by any sense, but I do experience it, and it's painful. And you keep wondering why it always keeps happening.
I recognize how tiring it is for people of color to be having to make the same arguments that should have been clear for centuries.
The city obviously has a horrible history of blatant and implicit discrimination. I mean, we have redlining, we had the destruction of neighborhoods.
We certainly are a society where there have been historical injustices, and we need to recognize that that has posed an obstacle towards minorities.
It'll take courage for city government to really put themselves in the footsteps of struggling families, and that courage to acknowledge that is a reality that exists every day in our city, and that we need to do something about it. That's what racial equity is.
So we're coming to City Council with 3 overall citywide racial equity goals. And along with those are several strategies to be able to implement and achieve these goals. So what it really does is provides a guidepost for city employees, city leadership to follow to achieve these racial equity goals.
Well, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for further partnering in accountability. You know, it is really the job of the community to hold us accountable, among other things. So I think that when we have stated goals that we've adopted and we say, here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there, which is why I think it's also important that the strategies are included.
So I believe the first step is to recognize, to understand, and to be willing to support the places where the least amount of resourcing and opportunity has been granted. I do believe you raise all the ships when you raise those that are on the bottom. I think the second piece is to acknowledge the racial history and the disparities that have occurred.
And racial equity means understanding both that diversity today and the institutional racism and historical wrongs that underlie that diversity, even now, even this week, this month, this year, even here in Portland.
It takes honest, persistent, and courageous conversations and action. It takes the long-term view, because we're not going to solve this problem overnight. We're not going to solve hundreds of years of history overnight. But ultimately, it means people of goodwill, of loving heart, of clear purpose coming together to tackle the most persistent problem in America and saying that we will not be satisfied until we make progress.
Well, we really want to institutionalize the concept of equity in the use of an equity lens, in the use of equity tools. And so having the city bless these and institutionalize these goals does just that. It allows them to exist no matter who's sitting in any particular seat.
They're not giving us a favor. We've earned this. We've earned this seat at the table. So we need to understand that, coming in and respecting each other for what we've done.
We all need to play our part, and it's going to be uncomfortable for everybody. And we need to be with that uncomfortableness and recognize that that's part of the penalty we pay for a system that is unjust.
I believe we could do it. I believe that the city council needs to set a standard that is higher than the one that we've historically experienced. And I might be an outlier by saying that, but that's a familiar position for social justice people.
We need an Office of Equity more than ever, and I'm extremely proud that this city has taken the lead in establishing an Office of Equity, and I'm proud of the work that that office is doing, embedding equity into everything we do as a community.
That's what we really are going for here, is an investment in the promise and potential of everyone in our community.
Equity is becoming part of that DNA of who we are as a city and how we operate. And that's, of course, where we want to be. We want equity not to be a veneer or an afterthought. We want it to be who we are and how we roll.
These goals may be specifically couched in terms of racial equity, but achieving these goals will help everyone and provide greater benefits for everyone as they receive the services of the city.
Because racial equity has impact to everybody. When one community thrives, everybody else thrives.
Nicely done.
So many thanks to Jeff Selby for his hard work in putting this together. Jeff, where are you, Jeff? He's probably
work.
somewhere taking pictures. And to all the staff.
there he is. He's back there.
There he is. And to certainly to all of my staff. Because equity does matter, and it's a 24/7 matter to me and my staff. So many thanks to them, and thanks to you for participating in that project. I think it says a lot. Your participation speaks volumes, and that's important as well. So in your packet is some information. You have a copy of the goals. You have a copy of also what is attached to them in terms of overall racial equity strategies. And so these are the methodologies to achieve these goals. And so Judith Mowry is going to provide some background on these, where they came from, how they can be best utilized. So Judith.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. The strategies we have brought to you today were developed in partnership with jurisdictions from around the country who are collectively identifying best practices to achieving racial equity. The Government Alliance on Race and Equity is a national network of government working to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for all. The Alliance cohort of jurisdictions have representatives from 12 jurisdictions in 8 states. Developing a network of government focusing on racial equity is critically important to getting to different outcomes in our communities. The goal must be beyond closing the gaps. We must lift up our overall outcomes, focusing efforts those who are faring worse. Deeply racialized systems are costly and depress outcomes and life chances for us collectively. To advance equity, government must focus not only on individual programs, but also on policy and institutional strategies that are driving the production of inequities. OEHR's racial equity work is guided by these strategies in all of the approaches we employ, whether it is through the work of the Citywide Equity Committee or our Civil Rights Program, which institutionalized scientifically designed practice into current operational systems and policy to deliver equitable outcomes. Adoption of these strategies further strengthens the work of achieving racial equity at all levels of government operations. And we are members of the Alliance, and we participated in creating the strategies. So we're very excited to be a part of some of the really most creative minds in the country that have been working on this issue.
Before we move into speakers, I just want to see if there's any questions before we move into some invited speakers that we have.
So under number 4, it says be data-driven. Measurement must take place at 2 levels. Measure the success of specific programmatic and policy changes, and second, to develop baseline, set goals, and measure progress. Do you have a plan for how to do that? What kinds of measurables we're looking at?
The Bureau's roadmap is the first line of doing this work. Each Bureau is going to be creating its own metrics based upon the categories within that they're assessing within their bureaus, and creating a 5-year plan for moving the needle from where they are to where they want to be. So that's the design of the roadmap, actually.
And I understand that a few bureaus have already piloted that process. Which bureaus were involved in the pilot?
The pilot, BHR,
Human resources?
I'm sorry, human resources, housing, we were, who else was it?
Yes.
Police Bureau, planning, and then there was one more.
And are those roadmaps available? Do we have a sense of lessons learned?
Well, they haven't completed the entire roadmap. Each of them did a particular section so we could get feedback on the sections and then provide for any changes that made sense. And so each one now is, in the first wave, they're all now working on their actual roadmap.
So then when we look at the rest of our bureaus, will we get some kind of input or advice from the Office of Equity and Human Rights in terms of lessons learned from those
Yes.
bureaus, what worked, what didn't? Because I'm finding it, yes, it's very different in parks versus development services, and there are some similarities, for instance, hiring practices, outreach techniques, those kinds of things, where we don't necessarily need every bureau to reinvent the wheel. We need them all to have a different wheel, but we don't all need to, we could learn from each other.
Sure. And so the plan is that as we receive these roadmaps, my staff will evaluate, offer, and they're going to be offering feedback and working with technical assistance, if you will, throughout their work on the roadmap. And then as we receive their finalized roadmaps, then we'll evaluate, offer feedback, send it back and say, take a look at adjusting this or make this more robust. So that's kind of the plan for the process.
So are the other bureaus going to wait until you've got that analysis done for us?
It's not done for council. It'll be done there's like 5, maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
I meant for us, the bureaus. I consider myself part of the bureau team looking at how do we create more equity. It would be helpful for me in development services and in parks and shortly in neighborhood involvement to know from the bureaus that have already gone through it what worked, what didn't, before we dive into figuring out how are we going to do things for our bureaus.
And Commissioner, we're launching this in waves. So we have 5 to 6 bureaus in a wave, and 3 months apart, or at least 2 months apart, so that we have the capacity to do the technical assistance to bring everybody up to board. Those teams meet together regularly to confer on what's working and what kind of barriers are people finding and what's important. 2 bureaus have submitted their plans, the first 2 bureaus, and we are in the process of beginning to evaluate the plans. And then we'll be having conversations with the bureaus about what seems strong, as Dante said, and working with the goals and the strategies to make sure that those things are also guiding how the plans look. So that will be coming. And then the hope is that folks who have completed theirs will, through the Citywide Equity Committee, stay engaged with the newer bureaus coming through so that they can act as mentors and guides. And we see the CEC members as a critical part of making sure that this moves through the bureau in the best way, and that we're not recreating the wheel. So we're working on that communication.
So I certainly appreciate the urgency, as was pointed out. We on the council, as was also evident in the videos, consider ourselves part of our bureau's teams and definitely want to give top-down leadership as well as things working through the grassroots and the frontline staff. So as quickly as you could get us some preliminary observations from the first cohort, lessons learned, that would be really helpful to me as I work with my directors to figure out what's the next steps in our bureaus.
Great, absolutely, we will do that.
And after the pilot piece of the presentation, the program, we did invite bureaus, all bureaus, and the representatives who will be working on their plans to come and hear the feedback from those who had gone through the pilot. So there was an opportunity for that feedback loop for folks who haven't yet gone through it.
Yeah, I just encourage you to include the council in those loops because we're all really invested. My final question is about disability, and I'm wondering, did Tacoma and Oakland include disability as a secondary focus like ours?
They did not.
And just to clarify for everybody watching at home, the reason that we're focusing on race is that we've already started the work on disability.
Yeah.
Want to talk a little about that, please?
Sure. I think as I have described it, there is an infrastructure in place around addressing issues of disability that is not in place around addressing issues of race. There is a Portland Commission on Disability that exists to focus on issues of engagement and interaction and hiring that does not exist for communities of color. There is the transition plan out of Title II to improve and ensure that there is accessibility in compliance with the law. There is no assurance of accessibility, social accessibility in terms of people of color. The city is now a model employer of people with disability. No such thing exists specifically for communities of color. So there is an infrastructure in place that exists that we hope that this will provide some sense of balance in the same way. So
And
thank you for your
Can I
question.
add that we're working closely with the Commission on Disability as well to talk about, I think our office is about transforming government so it's accessible and works for everyone. And so there are a lot of pieces that we may find helpful that we then integrate through a disability lens as well. We're excited about that work.
Yeah, and as obviously what we're finding in the Department of Justice work, that it's where race and disability intersect that we have some of the worst outcomes. So I really appreciate your focus, bringing this piece to us with such detail, and then also recognizing that there's intersections and parallel work that's also being done. Thank you.
Very much, very much.
Can I follow up
Go
on
ahead.
that conversation for a second? So we're about to hire a number of new bureau directors. Dan's doing a search for a housing bureau. I'm on the finish line of a search for a new water bureau director. We just hired a new BES director. One of the ways that we communicate clear expectations to the people that report to us is through the letters of expectation, which we do annually. And I'd sort of like to, in my case, I've got two directors who are going to roughly at the same time get letters of expectation that set uniform standards. And I think what would be helpful to me is if we develop some model language that you'd like to see in all such letters. Now we can, that sets the floor. So what is the expectation? And then clearly, based on the roadmap and the consultations, and because each bureau is a little different, we can zero in on what we want someone to focus on over the next year or two.
Right.
And set the benchmarks. But I could use some help, and we can either draft something and send it to you for comment, or if you had, a sample paragraph which you think generically embraces the values of what you're presenting today, I would welcome that too. I think it's time to start embedding that in all letters of expectation.
No, I thank you, and I appreciate the chance to engage in that. And either way would, I think, be beneficial, but just brainstorming the best way to do that, we are happy to do. And I think, as I mentioned before, I have yet to receive one of those. So I'm not sure that they are done as uniformly as you might think. And so how we can embed just the entire process of ensuring that bureau directors receive those in the first place, I think is another piece of the pie.
And Commissioner, thank you also for that, because I think then we can tie that to reviews, which is one of the things that is a best practice, is to set some goals around equity work for leadership, both at the director level, management level. So that's one of the things we're hoping to move toward, and the roadmap actually addresses some of the leadership pieces. So we could probably send something to start the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So comment and then a question. These are really concise and clear, these goals. And I guess I want to make sure we all know that we mean it. And that gets to the question, which is about whether this is binding or non-binding policy. But when I read equity goal number 1, for example, and it says we will end racial disparities within city government, so there's fairness in hiring and promotions, et cetera. So if you look at the situation today of the Fire Bureau and the Police Bureau, where we've made modest progress in making a workforce reflect its community, that means, and I think this is a plain reading of that goal, that we are not saying we will try to end racial disparities, or we will work towards ending racial disparities, but we will end racial disparities in those bureaus. That is, we will have a police bureau and a fire bureau that is reflective of the diversity of the community it serves.
Yes.
So that's a big deal, I mean, if it's binding. So if it's just an intention or a hope, then the fact that it's not binding wouldn't maybe matter as much. It also wouldn't have as much impact.
Right.
So therefore, there was some question about in the drafting of this, whether it was binding or non-binding as policy. To help us out, explain that. I'm inclined to say we should make this binding.
Thank you.
But help us out in understanding, and maybe others will want to comment on this when they speak,
Sure.
about what the difference would be in effect
Thank you. And it was, I guess, our misstep in how we presented the resolution when we submitted the documentation. According to, I guess, code, as I've later learned, there's a requirement that the language be very specific and specifically state that this will be binding city policy, as well as checking a particular box on the documentation that says binding city policy. That was not done when the resolution was presented a week or so ago, and so if it is not, then it's merely feel-good, as opposed to something that is very concrete and binding that our stakeholders, the community, could then come back and hold the city accountable for. And so that's really what the expectation is, and my hope is that in the adoption of this, that the council will adopt it as binding city policy.
Do you like an amendment to that effect?
I would love an amendment to that effect.
I move that at the end of the, now therefore be it resolved that the citywide racial equity goals and strategies attached as Exhibit A are adopted by City Council as binding city policy.
Second that. So any further discussion on putting that amendment on the, into the draft and soliciting comment about that from folks that speak? So roll call on accepting that amendment?
Saltzman?
Aye.
Fritz?
I appreciate that you had exactly the same thought that I did. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hales?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or anything?
Questions, comments
Okay.
at this point?
Thank you. So as you've seen the video, again, a phenomenal video, which represents the community, represents our stakeholders, represents you, represents the employees of the city. Those who we provide our city services to, they support this work. And also in your packet is a letter of support from our Bureau Advisory Committee as well. And I want to say this, and I think the segue was the binding city policy. This isn't symbolic and shouldn't be received or perceived as symbolic. Symbolism is important. I mean, there's a reason that the Confederate flag needs to come down, because it's a symbol of something. There's a reason why offensive native logos need to come down, because they are a symbol of something. And they make a difference, because the community perceives and feels what that symbol represents. And so I would suggest to you that the video, I mean, it looks good, it's cute, equity matters, everybody's smiling, and it looks great. But we can't let it just be a symbol. We have to ensure that we mean what we say, and it just doesn't go off into the annals of city policy in a book somewhere, but we mean what we say, because the community needs to know that we mean what we say and feel that something is happening differently because of what we say. And so it's not just a symbol. And so, in that regard, I wanted to invite up just a few specific speakers today from the ranks of community members and city employees who are doing equity work, who can speak to the benefits of further institutionalizing this work. So, Nikenge Harmon Johnson is here. Please come on up. Is Patricia here? Patricia Rojas, I think, got stuck because of United's plane problem. So I was going to call up Sharon Gary Smith then, who looks surprised, but she's not really surprised. And Art Hendricks and Eric Nomura.
You can slide up another chair there. You too.
Bring one over here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Dante, thank you for inviting me to speak today. Commissioners, my name is Nikenge Harmon Johnson. I am the new president and CEO of the Urban League of Portland. I've had the pleasure of meeting several of you before, and I imagine that we'll be working together closely in the months and years to come. In years past, it's likely that Midge Purcell, our Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement, would have been here to speak today to lend the Urban League support to these important goals and strategies. But as you are aware, about a month ago, thanks to Commissioner Novick and the other commissioners, were gracious enough to celebrate Midge Purcell and all of the work she has done for the Urban League, but as well as our city before she'd ventured off to London for the next stage of her life. I want to thank you again for doing that. It was a very special occasion for all of us. I'm here today to voice support for the citywide racial equity goals and strategies released by the Office of Equity and Human Rights under the leadership of Dante James. I will also offer some concrete ways we believe the office and the city can move forward with this work. Much has happened over the past few years to advance equity and racial equity in Portland. Members of the council may be aware that the Urban League of Portland advocated for the Office of Equity and Human Rights to be created. It was an important priority for us and for other community-based organizations. And I think based upon what we've heard today from Dante and seen of the work of his staff, it was clearly something important for our city. Also, through the release of the Racial Equity Strategy Guide in 2012, the Urban League has worked dutifully to get down to the nuts and bolts of what equity means day to day on an operational basis. It's nice to talk about pie in the sky and things that we wish could happen, but if we don't have the operational details and a real framework in place, then all we'll ever do is talk about what our wishes and hopes and dreams are and not the change that can actually occur. It's vital that we put those tools in place and that we have the mechanisms necessary for on-the-ground change throughout city government. Paramount to our collective work and to the individual efforts of bureaus is uniting around a common vision of how to remove the systemic barriers that lead to inequitable services and operations in Portland. Listen, I'm a kid who grew up in this town, so I know a little something about when Dante talks about how we choose which sewers we repair, which sidewalks we develop, which parks receive attention. It matters. The Racial Equity Strategy Guide was created by the Urban League of Portland through a partnership of community advocates and city staff. We are pleased to see many of the same visions from the guide reflected in the approach chosen by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. The strategies proposed will help to organize efforts and guarantee progress is made in our city government. I want to stress that all 3 goals and all 6 strategies are needed to ensure a comprehensive approach. With a racial equity framework, bureaus have the opportunity to build on best practices, create capacity for long-term institutional change. And I don't have to tell you how important that is, because no matter who is sitting in your seats or in the seat here or in Dante James' seat, this work will still matter and should not be subject to the winds of politics. Those professionals whom you employ to lead the equity work need the tools to inform their priorities, the data to evaluate their work, and the community partnerships to hold the city accountable. Moreover, equity leaders need metrics in order to best engage other leaders throughout the bureaus. As leaders that are focused on the bottom line, I know you'll understand when I say we measure what we treasure. If we don't count it, it doesn't count. Squishy goals quickly become obscured wish lists, and that mustn't be allowed to happen, not in our city. The Urban League wants to see leadership embrace all 3 equity goals with capacity and a message that tells city employees and the Portland community. We believe that fairness in all areas of government, from education to criminal justice to health, housing, jobs, economic development across the board is key for a more prosperous Portland. We're all anxious to see these strategies applied. I imagine you'll hear something similar from the folks sitting to my left and to my right. The Urban League and AFSCME have helped to lead the Workforce Equity Coalition in partnership with a number of community advocates over the last year. I imagine that you'll be hearing more about this Workforce Equity Coalition in the months to come. But suffice it to say that we've organized a set of recommendations around workforce equity that include using an equity framework to inform recruitment, hiring, retention, and data collection practices in all city and county jobs. As we seek to pass a resolution that incorporates these recommendations, we encourage you to use this opportunity to collaborate with communities and institutions to take a comprehensive approach to workforce equity. Finally, the Urban League of Portland released the 2015 State of Black Oregon in May of this year. Mayor Hales was kind enough to join us for the launch event. We were reminded through the stories, data, and analysis of this report that we do not all share in the Portland we hear about in lifestyle magazines and in media around the country. This report, however, stated our vision for the reality we wish to see for all of Oregon and for all Portland families. We challenged our city and state partners to accept the work it will take to reach that reality. The day-to-day work is hard and will require coordinated approaches. approaches such as those proposed by Mr. James and his staff. We ask the city's leadership to embrace the tools and strategies offered both from the community and the Office of Equity and Human Rights, and help shepherd us toward a more equitable Portland. The only criticism that I will share regarding these goals and strategies is, frankly, to ask, why haven't we done it before now? I grew up in a Portland that felt more diverse and inclusive than it does today, even though we know that there are more people of color in this city than there were 20 years ago. Our elected and appointed leadership simply does not reflect that reality. So I encourage you to do what it takes to make the change necessary to live in the kind of Portland that we all believe in, the reasons, and make it live up to the reasons that we all call it home. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to entertain them if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Nikinge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Who's next?
I'm actually working.
Art, go ahead.
Mayor, members of council, my name is Art Hendricks. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Manager with Portland Parks and Recreation. And I want to give a quote. I believe was from Seneca, and Mayor, I think you'll appreciate this. It says that you must know which harbor you are headed if you are to catch the right wind to take you there. And I believe that these goals provide the harbor and the focus in terms of where we need to go as a city, and particularly our efforts in Portland Parks and Recreation, I believe, mirror the goals that have been developed and identified by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. There's another proverb, it's one of my favorites, an African proverb that says, if you don't know what road you're on, any road will do. And I have found that in my experience in the past, far too often diversity and equity efforts have been whatever road we're on, let's just go with that. And I think that as we become more diligent and more serious as a city, these goals and strategies will help me work more effectively within my own bureau, but more importantly, to begin to start working on the challenge across the city with my partners and in other bureaus as well. To know that we will have a similar framework and a similar focus, I think we will be able to achieve some of the goals outlined, particularly around the workforce hiring. The challenges for us in parks are not just park-specific challenges. I think there are challenges when I talk to my counterparts in planning, in BDS, around how do we find suitable talent that can be in our planning divisions, for instance. So I think as we move forward, we can't have just individual bureaus doing individual efforts. We have to also figure out how collectively we can leverage each other's work to be more impactful. So I want to applaud Dante James and his staff for this work. I also want to applaud the video, and will say that I think it will serve as an excellent tool for us in terms of onboarding for employees with a very clear message, and certainly the support of council and your voices in terms of this binding resolution, I think will make my job much easier, that it's not just Art Hendricks's preference in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, but that my role really is to carry out the will of council and the city.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
Forgive me, but this is the first time I've ever addressed City Council. Commissioner Fish, Commissioner Fritz, Commissioner Saltzman, and Mayor Hales, thank you for your attention and efforts today in addressing the adoption of citywide equity goals and strategies presented by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. I'm Eric Nomura. I'm a complaint investigator with the Independent Police Review Division for the City of Portland Auditor's Office. I speak before you today with the full support of my director, Constantine Severe, and my elected leader, Auditor Mary Hull Caballero. I'm a member of the Auditor's Bureau Equity Committee and represent my office at the Citywide Equity Committee. I'm also recently been added to the steering committee for the Equity Committee, so I'm a part of a lot of committees lately. I moved here from 1991 from Hawaii because I fell in love with this place, and I found it quite easygoing, and the people here are very generous and kind. I'm a product of Portland Community College and Portland State University. I've worked in state government for 17 years, and the City of Portland. I've been here in the City of Portland since 2013. During my years with the state, I worked in divisions that were closely tied to the welfare of people from underrepresented and vulnerable populations. But yet for the last 11 years working there, which I spent commuting to Salem, I can't recall the topic of equity being emphasized in any form or made part of my duties. The City of Portland should accept praise for the willing attention and priority of efforts to address perhaps the most difficult task facing government institutions at this time today. The goals and strategies presented today represents a crucial step in transforming the role government has in ensuring that people of the City of Portland employs and serves receive equitable treatment and services. This is not an easy topic of conversation, nor should it be. There are some who look at this movement as hope for equality for all humans and embrace the challenges ahead, willing to make sacrifices to achieve those goals. I experience this energy often through my interactions with the City Equity Committee and my borough's Equity Committee members. I also experience the reluctance to engage in equity-related conversations. As you know, humans, generally we have a hard time thinking of ourselves in a negative way, and when attempting to engage in racial equity conversations, that particular element surfaces. There appears to be this notion that one cannot engage in equity practices without accepting some sense of fault for the current standard, of operations. There's a common association between admitting failure and feeling guilt, and that can lead to more heated emotions. And as we observe daily from media and social media sources, emotions can sidetrack the ability to achieve your goals. I am grateful that as a collective, we are working together on this important, enormous challenge and are modeling the appropriate manner in which to address the uncomfortable and interfering feelings that the subjects of racism and disparity cause. The three goals presented today are crafted after best practices observed across the nation, conducted by those who dedicate their life's work to eliminating inequalities in their communities and institutions. Each goal has measurable outcomes to ensure our practices moving forward can demonstrate progress. The 6 strategies presented today define the shift in perspectives the City of Portland needs to make eliminating inequitable laws, policies, and practices successful. I feel it necessary to emphasize the strategies go beyond the written words before you. Through my history of employment, somewhere along the lines, I accepted defining myself as someone who just works for the government. Gratefully, I have had family, friends, and mentors in my life who refuse to stop reminding me of what I am, and that is a civil servant. That simple term defines more about what I am responsible for and my duty to the people of the state of Oregon and to this republic. I took the oath to serve all, and such a distinction should be on all, such distinction should be on all our minds today. The first step, adopting these goals and strategies, helps to set the stage for a larger transformation. We, as civil servants, have a duty to ensure the Constitution of the United States and associated laws that govern the state of Oregon and the City of Portland are upheld. Although this is implied at times, I believe there is a clear need for all government employees to understand we are servants to the public no matter what our job description says. Empower all of us to face the challenges ahead by adopting these goals and strategies. Give every employee, including yourselves, unobstructed access to the tools necessary to dismantle the barriers of institutionalized policies and practices that feed this inequity. Finally, I would like to conclude with an opinion, although most of what I said is kind of an opinion in the first place. I mentioned earlier that the feelings that get in the way of progress. There are negative connotations associated with this term that we use, accountability. Motivating people to engage in difficult self-reflection and institutional analysis is made more difficult when, looming in the back of their minds, thoughts, there are concerns or fears of discipline or punishment. I ask this council in taking on this endeavor, where we're all unlikely to be here when we can say mission accomplished, to emphasize acceptance, compassion, and patience for all. So thank you for my moment to address this council, and I'm sincerely grateful, and I'd just like to say PTFC, RCTID, onward Rose City.
Thank you. Were you there on Sunday? That was
Move
great.
the whole block, the block moves.
Slide that whole box down
The
towards
block
Sharon.
moves.
Oh, the block moves? Now that is equity.
Wow.
Hey.
I'm Sharon Gary Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of MRG Foundation, formerly known as Mackenzie River Gathering Foundation. It's Oregon's leading social justice funder. And to be here in this moment, though I've been here before, is actually a moment for a pause, to really reflect on this moment having come. There is so much work ahead of us, and as it's been outlined so not only courageously, but specifically by the Office of Equity and Human Rights. I want to praise them for what it took to get to this moment. I certainly want to praise you also, Mayor and Commissioners, for having the audacity, given the times we're in and the struggles we continue to see, even those captured on cell phones, to recognize not just the importance of equity and a sense of belonging for all of us, particularly people of color, in this city of roses, but that it flies in the face of the assumption that equity is not going to benefit all of us. That when our lives matter, when our communities are addressed as communities, when the work of working for and representing all of the citizens begins to be the work that is charged, informed, and led by our elected representatives. That will be a powerful statement that Portland not only has history, Oregon has history, but it is creating new history, new equity, new opportunity, and a new sense of belonging. I cannot in any way minimize the importance of feeling that you belong when decisions are made, when allocations are granted, when decisions about where the money goes, who the money goes to, whose neighborhoods can be whole and safe, and not just when they're gentrified. When we begin to plan for a future that includes all of our futures, as been so carefully and very eloquently expressed by my colleagues. That is a day that 3 years ago I might not have been able to imagine could actually happen. I've always had hope, the audacity of hope, as our president says, but to be audacious about hope in the face of constant disappointments about who gets hired, who gets trained, who gets retained, who's able to take advantage of the services. I want to mark this moment today as a pivotal moment in moving our city forward, in moving and representing and leading in equity, as we do in Portland in so many other areas. I want us to be the bike capital. I want us to be the commuter capital. I want us to be the dog-friendly capital, where people who do or don't have dogs, but have a sense of agency, belonging, owning, and feeling a critical participant in this city's mission and its work, can stand proudly and say, I am a Portlander. I am an Oregonian. I matter. I'm visible. I'm represented. I'm employed. I use services. I have access. I matter. And particularly a child like me many years ago, who was raised in Portland, who was advantaged by public school education, who lived in wonderful neighborhoods, but was Black and thought to be less than. I would like to be able to express the joy and the satisfaction of being a part of the diversity of this community that builds it and makes it what it is. I can't appreciate Dante James and his staff enough for taking the constant steps of helping us fall forward and move forward on equity. And I thank every one of you for whatever it took to come to today, to amend non-binding to binding, and to begin to set a tone. The work ahead is hard. The work ahead will be questioned. There are people who don't get it. There will be people who resist. But if your leadership is more than this moment, and I believe it is, then you will set a tone, and we can figure out all the details about how to move us in a way that's challenging and opportunistic. I'm going to hold out hope, and I'm going to spread the joy of this moment. of seeing what can happen in a city that says it works 24/7. On equity, I would expect the same. So I want to thank you. I don't want to challenge you or chastise you today, although as a voting member of the public, that's my right. I want to appreciate you for doing what you're elected to do, to lead and serve all of us. I look forward to the evidence, the benchmarks, and the outcomes of this endeavor. And I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. Yes, hear, hear.
I'm glad you went last. Oh,
Thank you all. Any questions for this panel?
The record will reflect that was Sho DeZono who began the cheering from the third row in the back.
Yeah, that guy.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Dante, do you have others you have arranged to have testify?
I just want to thank very, very much those who came to offer remarks. And if I may, maybe it's unusual, before you conduct your vote, I would like to ask my staff to all come up here so they can be a part of this vote.
Oh, but we have to take other testimony first, though.
Oh, there's more testimony.
There might
Okay. Then I'll be back. Thank you.
Do we have others signed up to speak?
Yes, we have two people, Charles Johnson and Shabri Vickers.
Okay, come on up. That should be. Go ahead, Mr.
I defer to let the Human Rights Commissioner go first.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Shabri Vickers, and I am here today as the chair of the Human Rights Commission. I come here representing the entire commission and want to quickly and concisely express our absolute support of the OEHR's equity goals and strategies. And I urge you, as city leaders, to take these goals seriously. Recognize that the outcome is bright, not only if we achieve these goals, but as we move towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and others in our community, one where a socially just reality is the norm. Please feel okay with asking the hard questions in your daily tasks where you suspect racial inequity exists. The cognitive dissonance that we all experience as privileged members of this great city should fuel us on these goals and the next iteration and the next. Lastly, remember that organizations move in the direction of the questions that it asks. And so I urge you to continue to ask great questions to move us towards binding movements. And I appreciate this moment here. And there's really nothing else to say after someone like Sharon Gary Smith comes up. So I'm just going to end that and say thank you for the time and thank you for the vote.
Thank you, Shabri. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My name is Charles Johnson, and of course, we're really just echoing the sentiments of Sharon Gary Smith, but that it's important that these things become binding. And there's a larger context, unfortunately, that's emerging here from the recent reporting in the Oregonian from Maxine Bernstein. When we don't really get serious about fairness and binding, we're discovering that thousands of victims of sexual assault have not had their kits tested. And that should be an affront to all the victims, but particularly women, because women are still oppressed and discriminated against in this society. And part of the problem is we don't have enough benchmarking, enough real commitments. So I encourage this council to adopt binding language and to be more comfortable with having more public engagement where we talk about failures to achieve goals, systemic issues that have contributed to that, people's personal biases and racism that are alive and thriving in different places in the city of Portland, and how we can counter those problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. Anyone else like to speak? If not, then let's take a vote, please, on the resolution and as amended to be.
Dante wants to have a
Oh,
staff
sorry.
up here.
Dante, you were
Wants to have a staff.
orchestrating that, and I was getting ahead of you now, so we both jumped the gun.
Thank you, sir. I just really wanted all of my staff to be a part of this vote.
please.
And if I could invite them up, just because I think really this is a very momentous occasion for this work in the city. And they've all been a part of this. They all do this every day. They all run into obstacles every day, and they all continue to come back every day because it's important and they believe it and they feel it, and they want to make this city better. So thank you for letting me have my staff up here.
Can we put everyone's name in the record?
Yeah, absolutely.
What they do.
Starting with Joe.
Joseph Wall, Assistant Director.
Tatiana Lejalde, Disability Equity Program Coordinator.
Tanya Stevens, Executive Assistant.
Judith Mowry, Senior Policy Advisor.
Danielle Brooks, Civil Rights Manager.
David Gallant, ADA Title II Access Coordinator.
Kofi Desu, Equity Training and Education Program Coordinator.
Jeff Selvey, Communications Coordinator.
Thank you all for being here today and for this good piece of work. Let's take a vote.
Saltzman?
Well, thank you for the presentation. More importantly, thank you for putting together the goals and strategies. And, thank you. I want to thank Dante personally. I think you are the first director of this office, and I think you've really helped to set the tone. And, I'm sure when you came to Portland, you recognized there are no shortage of challenges here, as there probably are in a lot of cities, but, you know our history by now and know that we've overcome, I'm not sure, overcome's not the right word, but we have witnessed many injustices in our city. And it's up to those of us in leadership positions to lead and set the tone for a more just, more equal society. And I'm sure that, you've done a great job of that. And I think you've, I don't mean to say this in any manner of an insult, but you've kept it simple too. I attended your Equity 101 training, my office did, and, it's very focused. And it's not trying to sort of take on the whole world in one 2-hour session, 3-hour session. But, and I think these goals are similarly focused. This could easily have been a 10 or 15-page document, double-spaced, single-spaced, and, you get to a certain point and focus gets lost, and it's all a bunch of just, words stringed together that sound good. I think this is pretty insightful. I think it gives me something, and I think it gives all of us something here that we can, refer to and hopefully emulate in our everyday role here as members of City Council, as heads of bureaus. So I want to thank you and the great staff you've assembled too. I know most of you, and many of you I've come to know, and I want to give a particular shout out for Jeff doing a great job on a shoestring budget and a shoestring camera, putting together a first-class video. But no, this really is great work, and as I said, it's very concise, and there's a lot of merit in government these days for being concise and forthright. So thank you all, and I'm pleased to support this and vote aye.
Fritz?
Thank you, Commissioner Saltzman. I just echo everything you just said, and also thank everybody who came here today just to sit and be present and to show your support by being here. It's a beautiful assembly of folks as I look out of here, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow afternoon. We're having a discussion on housing policy and who should benefit from city subsidies, and it's going to be interesting to see whether this binding city policy enters into that discussion, as I think it should. And since I believe we're all going to sign on to it, and I know Commissioner Novick, if he were not on vacation, would also do so, we want the community to continue to remind us. That's part of the holding us accountable, is that this is a binding city policy, and we need to keep our word. Politicians, just like everybody else, should do what we say we're going to do or explain why we were not able to do it. And certainly we're not going to be able to end racial disparities by the end of this year. We should be making progress, and each of my bureau directors have as part of their annual performance evaluation, how did you do? How did you move the needle on the numbers within your bureau? And whether it's 17 different hiring managers, as I think it is in parks, or a smaller number than that in development services, the directors are responsible for making sure that the right questions are asked, the right people are on the panel, the right outreach is being done. And so your collaboration, led by Director James, has been hugely instrumental in that. This and better will do is the Salvation Army saying, the Salvation Army being 150 years old this year. There's some better we have to do, because we can no longer afford on any different level of accountability to continue with the disparities that we have in our communities. I did disagree with one thing that you said, Commissioner Saltzman, and that is that Director James knew what he was getting into when he came here. I consider I'm quite proud of having enticed him here, and, because it's shocking. When you start looking into exactly what the disparities are, which is what the State of Black Oregon report that in 2009 showed, it's shocking. We're not who we think we are. and we're not who we need to be. So thank you, Dante, for your guidance and your assembling of this great team. Thank you, each one, for what you do. It's hard work. It is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It is challenging, and it's not going to get done anytime soon. So it's important to celebrate milestones like this and to recognize that we are making progress, and we need to keep going. Thank you. Aye.
Fish.
You still owe me, though.
Sharon's still here. I can't see her, but I just was reminded that, Sharon, if we had listened to some of the voices in the room when we took up this debate, we would not have an Office of Equity today. So it took a lot of strong voices, particularly in the community, insisting that we have an Office of Equity. And I want to specifically thank Commissioner Fritz and former Mayor Adams for making it a priority that we not only establish an Office of Equity, but we fund it. A couple months ago, I found myself in the rare situation of feeling discouraged about a number of things. And for those of people who know me well, I'm sort of more of a cup half full person than someone who gets discouraged. But there were some things that were bothering me. And I just made a few notes, and I was reflecting on how quickly history has pivoted. Henry Johnson got his Medal of Honor, even though it took 100 years. Pope Francis issued his encyclical and talked about protecting our common home and changed the whole debate in America around equity and the environment. Barack Obama went down to a memorial service and sang Amazing Grace and electrified a nation in talking about grace. The Supreme Court affirmed the dignity of every marriage for all Americans and changed history. And for good measure, the women of America won the World Cup, which was, for those of us who love soccer, the icing on the cake. So I'm not feeling as discouraged. But I want to thank this team for their hard work, because there were a lot of doubters when we started this process. And I think the only way you disprove the doubters and the critics is to deliver on the promise, and that's what you're doing. And the one thing I told Dante earlier was, as we talk about these roadmaps and we talk about benchmarks, I don't want to hear about this secondhand. And since I have the luxury, as with Commissioner Saltzman, of being in a position where we're going to put into place new directors, I want to be in the room when we talk about what the expectations are for my bureaus. And I want it to be the commissioner and the director making the commitment to whatever the goals we're establishing in the short term and long term for the bureaus that I have the honor of leading. So thank you for your good work. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz, for your ongoing passion around this work. And I am proud to serve on a council that, even when there are new faces and new people up here, we consistently stand for equity. Aye.
Hales.
Well, I want to echo something that Commissioner Saltzman said a couple of minutes ago, which you had to make sure was not understood as a backhanded compliment, and that is, you said that this was simple, or that this language was simple. And actually, in the business of government, it's not easy to produce policy that is simple and plain spoken and succinct. And you've done that here. Each of these goals is one sentence. Not that many words, but if you read them carefully, there's a lot of heft to this, and by making this binding city policy, this council says these words, each of them, matter. And so I like these words. I'm going to keep them handy and, excuse me, measure our progress against them. But when I read them here, and I've been listening to the testimony, actually I had these flashes of people that, to me, represent those words. I mentioned the Fire Bureau earlier. We started in my first term as a city commissioner making progress that has continued in improving the workforce of the Fire Bureau. And not long ago, I watched a fire truck go by with a woman and an African-American man among the four in the crew. I thought, woo, I like seeing that go by. I just have that image in my mind. The other day, Chief O'Day swore in our first Somali-born Portland police officer. And I just have those people in my mind's eye as I look at those words about fairness in hiring and promotions. So those are maybe flashes of light in the progress that we still have to make, but I can see them. And then when I read these words about strengthening outreach, I remember the Bhutanese Chinese elders at our budget hearing who came together wearing their culturally based clothing and with translators to help them and speaking truth to power about what their community wanted from what we spend their money on. And I have that image of those and other groups of people from the community who came. In many cases, I think you asked the question, Amanda, how many of you, for how many of you is this your first city council meeting or public meeting? And a huge number of people in that room had just come for the first time to be citizens in that sense. So I can see them. And then when I read, we will collaborate, I see the moment that Dante and a couple of dozen other African-American men who are leaders in this community stood together at SEI and said, we're serious about this commitment to the Black Male Achievement Initiative and its areas of progress that we will measure just as we do here. So I see those people behind the words, and I know you did too when you drafted them. So I just want to thank you for putting the right words on the page, having all of us bind ourselves to them, and having everyone watch to make sure that we mean it and that we measure it and that we make more of that kind of progress. Thank you all very much. Aye. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and we will then begin at 3:15 on our next time certain item. So let's take item 753, please.
Adopt the Southeast Quadrant Plan as direction for updating the Central City Plan.
Well, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Let me open this hearing and welcome our team to the table. We don't get a lot of chances as a city to think about the big picture, but that's what this part of the planning process is really about, and to think about the path forward for a part of the city that's very dynamic. A lot of you have been involved in this part of the city for some time, and we look forward to hearing from all of you. I think it's important to remember that in the 1980s, when the last Central City Plan was written, we were a pretty different place. Employment was down, crime was up. Central City was a place that a lot of people maybe didn't want to spend as much time and energy and investment as they do now. Obviously now the Central East Side is really an economic marvel, and it's doing very well, and we're dealing with the problems of growth and demand more than we are with the problems of disinvestment or dysfunction. So I'm very interested in this part of the city, have been for a long time. I'm really interested in the work that you've done together. I want to appreciate Susan and Joe and Troy, the work that you as a bureau have done in preparing this proposal for the council and working so effectively with the community. There are a lot of strong opinions and strong personalities involved in this planning process, as I got to see when I had a chance to visit your committee meetings. And I just want to commend the work that the Bureau's done and that the community's done in collaborating on taking on a lot of tough questions and queuing them up for the council to take up today. So thank you for work well done and for something that this council's ready to dig into with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Susan Anderson, Director of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And with me today are Troy Doss, who's Senior Planner, and Joe Zenner, Chief Planner. As the Mayor indicated, we're here today to present the Southeast Quadrant Plan. The plan does reflect the thoughts and deliberations of really probably a couple hundred people, residents and businesses involved, and it is recommended by the Planning and Sustainability Commission. While there's many, many different key issues as a part of this plan, I want you to really kind of focus your attention on just 4 things to start with. The first is probably the most obvious. As the Mayor said, the Central East Side is a 21st century industrial district now. It has made some changes over the years. It has a diversity of jobs now. It has a diversity of industries. We have 18,000 jobs currently in the district and a forecast for 27,000 jobs by 2035. The jobs are for a variety of people, for a variety of industries, and for a variety of skills and education. And I think that in our economy right now, that's really important. A second focus area is that we are creating 2 very fantastic transit stations as a part of this at OMSI and at Clinton Station. These will be vibrant employment areas that are built on and that will depend upon great transit for their growth and their success. As you know, Portland, for 3 decades, has been a national, if not international, leader on the issue of transit and land use and how those come together. Along the way, we've kind of shown the world that transit-oriented development, that we know how to do that, and we know how to do that around mixed use and around housing. And now in the Central East Side, we're going to show that we can do transit-oriented development for jobs and industry too. A third area of focus in the plan is the waterfront. The plan will help ensure that the Central East Side is a vibrant waterfront destination. We are planning for more access. We are planning for more business opportunities and a quality environment. And finally, throughout the plan, focused on the whole idea of change. And businesses told us that they can thrive in the midst of change. A good example of this is how all of the parties came together to mix freight and transit and bikes and pedestrians and cars. The Freight Committee, the BTA, the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, and other stakeholders really coalesced to provide and build a framework that will enhance freight operations and provide for bike and ped safety throughout the district. So again, 4 things to think about: jobs and industry on transit, a vibrant waterfront with great environment, and great transportation and business options. The great part about this plan, and sometimes I end up not always getting to say this about all the work that we do, is how all the bureaus really work together. I really want to thank my fellow bureau directors for their efforts and for the efforts of their staff, especially Troy Doss with BPS, Geraldine Moyle with PDC, and Art Pierce at PBOT. We started calling them the Three Amigos. They were together at all times, it seemed, for the past 2 years. And the two co-chairs, Don Hanson and Debbie Kitchen. They and a lot of other people has brought this plan together. I'm going to turn it over now to Joe and to Troy to provide a very brief kind of overview of the plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joe Zender, Chief Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. What we're asking you today is shown in this slide. It's to adopt by resolution the Southeast Quadrant Plan and sort of to direct us to take this as guidance to complete the Central City 2035 plan, including the implementing codes. That's what's coming next. Just to remind you, what we've already completed in the Central City Plan is the concept plan for the whole Central City, 2 of the other quadrant plans, the Northeast and the West, and this is the last of those 4 quadrant plans. The other work that's being poured into developing the final code and the plan itself deals with the FAR bonus and transfer, part of which is what we're going to talk about tomorrow, and scenic resources, zoning code we have to develop, and by July of 2016, as our objectives, we're bringing back that complete package to City Council. The way we developed this plan over the last 18 months or so involved a significant amount of public process and actually 2 projects, 2 sort of studies that we ran concurrently, where we jumped on taking an analysis of the Clinton Station area so that we were able to try to advance our development thinking about this soon-to-be-opened light rail station, and then the Southeast Quadrant Plan itself. And the work of the plan was overseen by a 30-person stakeholder advisory group, and it was a group that worked very hard and worked in a very productive way, in a unique way sometimes, but productive in the end, and reached consensus on this project. And we had a lot of other opportunities for public outreach. Finally, just to remind everybody what we're talking about today in terms of geography, the Central East Side is shown in blue on this slide. When we look out 20 years, we're expecting 9,000 more jobs minimum in the Central East Side. That's a lot, and that's a significant portion, a significant contribution to what we're looking for out of the city as a whole. That's going to be spread over 706 acres. There's that much sort of space or land or sites in the Central East Side. A lot of jobs, but there's a lot more capacity in the Central East Side for jobs than just that even 9,000 acres. So we're going to see change, but it's not wholesale change, and that's been part of why we think the Central East Side has been successful from staying the course on an industrial sanctuary. It's got 24 acres per job today, and for an industrial district, those are typically in the single district. So this is a very successful place. We're adding flexibility, we're adding the opportunity for more types of businesses to be there so that we can even increase more beyond that 24 jobs per acre. And we're doing it in a way that we think will keep the district in balance economically, because even though we're talking about a significant amount of change, it's not wholesale change of the whole district. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy to go through the details of the plan.
Good afternoon. I'm going to walk you through some of the just big highlights of the plan. We started off with our stakeholder group and really set 4 primary project goals that everyone collectively agreed to. One was trying to get to our expanded employment opportunities, increased employment densities. As noted, we have a projection of about 9,000 jobs by 2035. It could be as high as 12 or 14,000 additional jobs. But either way, we know that even at 9,000 jobs, current zoning doesn't get us there. So we have to find a way to get there with some better working with the tools we have. At the same time, we want to protect the industrial businesses that are there. We're seeing a lot of growth in housing in the district. There are some incompatibility issues along the border between where housing and industry exists, and we want to make sure that we can get those addressed. So we've kind of long been overlooked. There's also issue about what do we do with these new station areas? We have 2 significant investment in light rail in this district. We have 2 new vibrant station areas coming on. We want to make sure that they're safe, places that are attractive and for people to go, as well as attractive for investment. And then lastly, we have a great opportunity here to recreate the waterfront there. This is one of the 4 places on the east side of the Willamette in the city of Portland you can actually get down and touch the water. Yet there's not a great opportunity to do that here yet. We think we can build around the assets of OMSI and the Spring Water Trail and other development at the station area to make that happen. In doing so, though, one of the things we heard was there were 7 primary priorities that the stakeholders said, if we're going to do all this, we need to make sure that, one, we really expand our industrial protections. We may be expanding what it means to be industry, but we want to make sure that we are protecting all industries at the same time. We want to maintain and enhance our parking supply and our management tools. We want to enhance freight mobility. Freight is going to continue to be a part of this district as it grows. We want to see that we can balance the needs of our multimodal transportation needs, because we do have a number of modes that are coming through: transit, bikes, peds, as well as auto. We want to see what the innovation quadrant, its extension from across the Tillicum Crossing into the district, can mean for this area, so expanding the innovation quadrant. And we want to look at how we better utilize some of the mixed-use corridors that exist in the district. I think one of the things that's overlooked a lot is that MLK, Grand, Burnside, Morrison, they're all zoned in similar ways in which the Pearl is zoned, high-density mixed-use development, yet we really haven't seen a response to that zoning pattern. It's been in place for 25 years until like the last 24 months. And then lastly, we want to figure out how to overall enhance the livability of the district. And that means everything from urban forestry to parks and open space. I'm going the wrong way. So the first layer of this would be land use. And what we're really doing is expanding an existing tool, and we'll get to that in a little more detail in a second, but we're looking at expansion of the employment opportunity subarea to all IG1 zone properties in the district. We're looking at rezoning the 2 station areas. OMSI would receive a mix of EX no housing and EX with housing as conditional use. And then the Clinton station area, which would be brought into the central city. Currently, it's outside the central city, wedged between the Hand and Brooklyn neighborhoods. That would come in as a mixed-use zoning or residential commercial mixed-use zone. The big move here is really the employment opportunity subarea. So currently, if you look at the image on the right, or sorry, on the left, that will show you the existing sub-area. And that is approximately 48 acres. Came into effect in about 2006. It's been an incredibly successful tool. It allows for what we call industrial office or creative office space. These are new industries that have come along since the adoption of the industrial sanctuary. Software companies, software and web development, graphic and industrial design, and studios as well. We have found a tremendous response to this. During the recession, growth was growing in this area by around 7 to 8% annually, created 1,000 jobs when most of the rest of the city was hanging on. Since that time, it's created about another 1,000 jobs. At the same time, has not displaced the existing businesses that were there. So it's been a very effective tool. There seems to be a lot of support for expanding this district-wide. One of the things we're doing with that as well is right now we want to enhance what the use allowances are for that zone. So right now we're a little restrictive. It would say you only do 60,000 square feet of that use per site. We'd like to change that to an FAR ratio of 3 to 1. The basis for that being that a site is defined by ownership. It could be a 1-acre site. It could be a 5-acre site. 60,000 square feet is kind of a small limitation. The other thing we wanted to do, though, is also protect the district from significant traditional office and retail growth. So striking a compromise in the expansion of the EOS, what we were able to do was minimize the amount of retail you can build currently as a conditional use in the IG1 zone. It's 20,000 square feet, and lower it to 5,000 max. And with regard to traditional office, it would also be 20,000 square feet down to 5,000 in these new IG1 areas. We'd also be removing the conditional use of up to 60,000 square feet of traditional office in the existing EOS. So what we're really trying to do is say, this is a district where industry is what we're really focusing on, not traditional office, not retail. The next thing is to look at, as the district continues to grow, as I mentioned, we're starting to see housing response on the corridors. When we started this project in 2010, we found that there was about 960 to maybe 1,000 residential units in the district. Currently, there's about 1,300 either on the books or being constructed in the district. So in the last 24 months. So one of the things we want to make sure is that we're protecting what's happening, because that housing is typically occurring across the street from industry. And so what we want to do is make sure that new development that's coming in is recording a covenant, disclosing the fact that, acknowledging the fact that I, as a new tenant or a new developer, am building an industrial district. My tenants in the future are going to have the charm of an industrial district. They're going to experience truck loading, they're going to experience noise and fumes, and maybe different hours of operation than you might find in other residential neighborhoods, because this is not a residential neighborhood. And so they're disclosing the fact that that's there, that will run with the property in perpetuity, and as long as those operations are occurring in a lawful manner, the city is not going to take action against those complaints. And then the next thing we want to do is take a second look at the development standards and design guidelines that are along that interface. One of the things that happens is you can be going down a street like 3rd Avenue or 6th Avenue and find that one side is zoned EX high density, the next across the street zone IG1. However, the development standards are so different on those two, the only separation is really at 60 feet of right-of-way. We want to find out how do we maybe treat the interface a little differently, not expecting that that is the strongest pedestrian environment or that's the highest design area. Maybe that's more of the back of house functions for those EX developments, and do that in a way that's putting a little bit less pressure or conflict against the industrial zonings across the street. The next three things we'll talk about before we close this up is transportation strategies. This plan really has been about as much land use as has been transportation. One of the things we really want to be mindful of is the continued need to address freight in this district. It's going to be a factor as long as this district is an employment area. And it's a district-wide freight designation, but there are some improvements that we could make to better get freight east-west through the district. Right now, you may know there's only 3 signalized intersections along MLK Grand. Makes it very hard for any mode to get across that area. So we see them queuing up in one space, all modes. So one of the things we propose to doing is putting some more signalized intersections on key north-south routes, allowing for that east-west mobility to occur, but then creating some one-way streets for freight, as kind of preferential streets, where they'll be able to have better turn movements and a better route to get to the key streets they're trying to get to, east to west. At the same time, we want to do the same thing for the bike and pedestrians coming through the district. We know that the inner southeast neighborhoods here have a 23% commute to work by bike mode split. It's the highest in the city, it's highest in the region, and they're coming through this district today, and those numbers are probably likely to grow. So one of the things we want to do is give them some routes that really get them east-west through the district as safely as possible, giving them one route that's very safe, giving freight another route that's very safe, and not trying to combine them necessarily on the same routes. We're also trying to memorialize some of these improvements by enhancing our existing transportation system plan to identify where some of these newer hierarchy of streets will occur, both for freight and for bike and ped. And then lastly, parking is always an issue in this district. We have a finite supply of on-street parking, and we have a pretty vast supply of off-street parking that currently can't be used due to some code restrictions that date back 20 years. When Park and Ride and Fairless Square were a factor that had people kind of leaving their car on the Central East Side and either walking or busing across the bridges to the west side. So one of the things we want to do is continue working with the Central East Side's Transportation and Parking Management Association to get a better sense of how to manage that on-street supply. But in the meantime, we want to open up the off-street supply to allow that to be used by customers, businesses, and residents of the district. Because right now, if I own a surface parking lot and Joe owns a surface parking lot, but he's out of space, I can't allow him to use that my space is by a code restriction. By eliminating that room one prohibition, we can open up about 3,000 to 4,000 parking spaces overnight. So that's something we want to be pursuing. And our long-term strategy will also start to involve district parking. I know that PDC is looking at a district parking facility as part of the redevelopment of the ODOT blocks. We want to look as the district starts to grow and become denser, where are other locations where maybe a district parking or district parking incentives for structured parking becomes something we want to put into play. So with that, I want to close by saying thank you to our stakeholder advisory group. We've worked with this group of 30 very diverse interests in the district over the last 2 years, both as part of the stationary work and as the quadrant work. This is just a small sample of the various staff that worked on this plan. And I know many of them are in the room right now. I can't call them all out by name, but I really want to thank everybody. This has been a fantastic team, and I've been proud to lead this effort. So with that, I open up to any questions you may have.
Okay, questions for the Bureau right out of the gate? I'm sure there will be more along the way, so thank you very much. I want to call first of some planned presenters, our co-chairs, Don Hanson and Debbie Kitchen.
Mayor Hales and Council, Don Hanson. I'll be very brief with my comments. There are a lot of people that want to speak today, and I want to hear them. I am a volunteer on the Planning and Sustainability Commission, and as part of that role, I volunteered to co-chair this advisory committee with Debbie, who's with me today. And I was happy to do that. I grew up in Southeast Portland, and one of my favorite jobs in high school was working in the district. I delivered produce at night. It was such an interesting environment. Trucks in that small district. Languages of choice were Italian and Japanese, and it was really just a fascinating district, and it's been fun for me to watch it change and watch it evolve through the years. I want to talk about, and I think that experience really going to help me understand what the advisory committee was absorbing and the decisions they were making. First, I want to brag about my advisory committee. Excellent group of stakeholders. The neighborhoods were well represented with Buckman and Hand. Willamette River Keepers were on the committee. Also, people that own property and operate businesses. The people that were truly going to be impacted by the decisions were there at the table all the way through. And they were very engaging over a number of months. And I'm sure they'll engage with you today, so you'll hear from them directly. Staff has put forward a solid plan from my perspective. It's very balanced. Troy listed out, all the factors considered and the decisions made. But I'll say something really simple about their approach. They listened. They listened to the committee, they listened to the neighboring groups, and they altered their decision-making process based on that input. It was truly an engaging proposition. The last thing I want to talk about, so I think it's a great framework for the district moving forward. There may be some details that will come out today, but framework is foundational and very solid. I want to put in a plug for the Green Loop while I'm here. It was presented to our advisory committee, and I think it's a great big idea for Portland. It involves the west side, it involves the east side, and could be a very unifying element on the central east side without impacting freight movement and everything else. I think it'd be a solid proposition for businesses that are there now, for bicyclists, just for the whole environment. So I wanted to mention that. So I'm in full support of the plan, obviously, because I chaired the advisory committee, but I just think it's a collection of very good ideas. So thank you.
Thank you. Debbie, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Debbie Kitchen, and I was also co-chair of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee and also serve as president of the Central East Side Industrial Council. We do have comments that the Central East Side Industrial Council submitted, and we sent some of those earlier, but there's a new Exhibit 1 that is part of that includes a list of, and I wanted to call it to your attention, because we often hear that there aren't many industrial companies in the Central East Side anymore, or that most of them have been around a long time and they aren't, that sector isn't growing, but actually we put together just very quickly kind of a partial list that just showed the new ones that in the last 5 years that have either had major expansions or new locations in the Central East Side. And it shows a diverse set of businesses. And so I guess what I wanted to say was that I think this plan for the Southeast Quadrant is a good compromise. It does retain the industrial sanctuary. It does retain the freight district. It does allow new businesses to come in the employment overlay. It has all kinds of plans for strengthening the corridors and taking advantage of that aspect. We've always had, as Troy said, we've always had that zoning, and it hasn't really been activated in the way that it could. So the Stakeholder Advisory Committee and staff work together from all the bureaus to look at a number of issues. And I think I would call this plan a compromise that we can live with and that we can build on as we go through the next phases of taking it and then elaborating it even more. So I think, speaking on behalf of the CEIC, although we had some detailed comments that you've included, I'm not going to really go over those. Really, I think we're happy with the amendments that are being put forth today, support those, and would just like to say that we benefited a lot from our work with staff and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. I think we were able to come forward with a plan that does keep the industrial sanctuary and does allow this really exciting mix of businesses that have come there to stay and thrive. And so I think it's, in that sense, it is a great success.
But just for clarification, this memo that you just gave us has several action items. Are those new requests for amendments?
No, some of these, we've actually worked on the amendments. So the amendments that were included yesterday do cover many of those things. This was adopted by our board meeting in June, and we've continued to work with staff and the Portland Freight Committee and others to meet many of those objectives.
So everything here is covered. You're not asking for additional amendments right now?
No, no.
Great, thank you very much.
Debbie, there seems to be one area where you're asking us to consider a further protection, and that's under the right to be industrial policy. So
Yes.
your commentary is that the industrial disclosure statement is not sufficient, and there should be an additional level of protection to protect against what you describe as complaints issued due to noise, smell, loading, et cetera, by virtue of industrial.
And what I think we envision with that is we don't have that disclosure statement now at this time, and so those details are going to be worked out, and we would like to see that be a very strong statement and have rules about how it is used both when properties are sold and leased throughout the district. So those details will be worked out in the, I guess you could have an amendment that would direct staff to, look at it in that way and see areas that could be strengthened or some elements like that. But we didn't have specific language about that at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So perhaps this might be the right moment, since you're the co-chairs, we have these staff, this package of staff proposed amendments. So I take it you and the committee recommend we adopt those.
Yes.
Okay. So I think it might be appropriate, even before we carry on into the rest of the hearing, that we take action to accept these amendments. And again, people can testify on both the plan itself that you've developed and the amendments that staff have developed. So I'm not sure if we've all got these. I hope we do.
I think I need another copy, Mayor.
Okay. So Joe or Troy, have we got copies for the council of the amendments? We might want to even bring them back up and walk us through those first before we go on. So thank you both very much.
Very much.
Walking through.
And Mayor, there is one where I'm proposing to amend the amendment. The staff
Okay.
agrees with my proposed amendment to the amendment, but
Okay.
it's not technically the initial
I think if you could,
amendment.
someone come up and just walk us.
And Troy, you might want to come up and just walk us through this set of amendments, just so, the 6 amendments, so that everybody knows what we're talking about.
Sure. Let me locate that a second.
What, you don't have them memorized? Come on.
One would think.
First of all, thanks again to BPS and to staff for providing the cheat sheet for us. I mean, this is the model on how we do amendments, and you guys said, thank you also for blowing it up so I can read it. And just in terms of protocol, as you go through each amendment, are you okay with taking questions on each one?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so Amendment 1 is the change of the comp plan designation and rezoning in response to a property at the east end of the Morrison Bridge. When 1990, when these zoning went into effect to implement the Central City Plan, most of the bridgehead development, or most of the bridgehead parcels were zoned OS, open space, because they were believed to have all been owned by Multnomah County. There was one oversight. One of those parcels, the parcel in question, was actually owned by the Bollinger family and remains so today. It's a surface parking lot and has been for decades. They'd like to see it rezoned the way all of the private development in that area had been zoned, which is EX, central employment. And we think that is fine. It's consistent with the rest of the zoning in that corridor. So, Amendment 2 is adding an action item which would be dealing with maker economy. I know that there will be some testimony on this from Kelly Roy with AVX Portland, and she may want to change or recommend a change as to who the implementer would be. But what we're really trying to do here is make sure that we're addressing that there's a strong, growing maker economy in the Central East Side as part of that diverse economic structure occurring. And we'd like to make sure that existing financial tools can be kind of looked at again, maybe some new ones developed to really help broaden and support the growth of the maker economy in the Central East Side. Amendment 3 is language that came out of our conversations that Debbie referenced with the CEIC and the Portland Freight Committee. And it's changing an existing action regarding the Green Loop. And basically what it's really trying to do is ensure that when in the final alignment or infrastructure design is created to implement a Green Loop over there, that it's done with freight operations in mind. That we're going to be very mindful. We're not going to put it on a place that's going to degrade freight operations. It's going to try to avoid them to the extent possible. But even then, the infrastructure can be done in a way that leaves freight harmless. We want to make sure that this amendment directs that approach. Amendment 4, Clinton Station area. So during the development of the plan, we found that clear visions for both the Clinton Station, and you could say the same with the OMSI Station, for how that site would be developed that would allow us to implement development standards, design guidelines, heighten FAR ratios, knowing that with some certainty that this is what was going to be developed. We just didn't have enough clarity from the major landowners and any of the station owners to do that. So in lieu of that, what we proposed is that a master plan provision be in effect and that we would change the zoning to EX, but we would only give them an FAR ratio of 1:1 and a height of about 100 feet at OMSI and 75 feet at Clinton. The basis being that you could earn more height and FAR through the development of a master plan. At that point, there'd be a better analysis of what the massings would be like, how views would be protected, what the public benefit from that additional development entitlement would be. A lot of the considerations would go in, and that would be handled through a public process. Now, if we had more certainty, we probably could have zoned around that now. We don't have that. So one thing that's been asked by some folks who own property at the Clinton Station was if we were able to develop that kind of a vision before the zoning is finalized, because we're going to be doing that over the next year, could that be substituted instead of a master plan requirement? That will be a public process. We'll be developing that code language as part of the final Central City 2035 plan over the next 12 months. So if they were able to do that, we could consider that, and that's what this amendment is putting forward.
Could you remind us what the geographic scope of this is without having to turn to page V5 and what the city-owned properties are in that?
Yeah, so it's largely what's known as the Clinton Triangle. So it's the areas that are east of Milwaukee and between Powell and the light rail and railroad alignment. So it is where the Gideon Fire Station facilities are located. And the other half of the property is owned by Stacy and Whitbeck, and it's mostly vacant property, although there is one, I believe, contracting supply business that is still located there. So collectively, there are some small pieces of property at the Clinton Station owned by TriMet, very thin band. The majority of the property there is owned by the city or by Stacy and Whitbeck.
So my concern was that the master planning process is a full public process where the development agreement can be fully vetted and that it's a specific opportunity for neighbors to weigh in with a defined public process. Going to a development agreement, as we've just discovered on Zidell, has only opportunities for citizens to come in towards the end when the agreement's already made. So I'm proposing to delete this amendment. And the staff agrees with me, but wanted to forward it for completeness.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
I'm officially confused since the cheat sheet says adopt as consent item.
And I don't think you were suggesting a development agreement, right?
No.
The situation here is that you got a legislative planning process underway, and you've got parcels. I assume this would be similar to the situation at OMSI or else if you think about the northeast quadrant, the Blanchard site, where you got a property owner who's got a big piece of property. They've got some notions about how they might develop it, but it hasn't been clarified yet. And we have the book open, in effect, because we're working on the comp plan. And you could, as a property owner, come forward with a specific development plan at that point with design guidelines and get it adopted. Or you could not do that and come back later and go through the master plan process, right?
Yes, so for instance, the Blanchard site's a great example. The post office site in the River District or the Pearl is another example. If there was some clarity that came forward while we're developing the final code as part of that public process, that could be something that could be supplant doing the master plan. It would be just as much public process,
opposed
if
to a
not more in some
conditional
ways,
use, yeah.
because it would still be going to the planning commission, probably seeking advice from the design commission, and then coming back to this body as well. So there would be plenty of opportunities to help shape those plans.
That's actually what we're doing with the post office, right? We have a planning process underway.
That has just started, yes.
It's not necessarily going to result in a conditional use master plan. It might result in a plan district proposal or something like it that goes into the comp plan. Okay.
But just, I just want to make sure I'm on track here. So Commissioner Fritz, are you saying that you do not support the additional language that's added?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, so we'll come back to that.
So I'm a little confused. You don't support the underlying language or the whole language?
No, the whole language is what's currently in there, and that's fine. I don't support removing the requirement for a master plan, because this whole comp plan is going to be so complicated and huge that it's going to be very challenging for citizens to participate at an adequate level of detail in planning this site, which after all is really kind of quasi-judicial. It's the city and Stacy and Woodbeck. So it seems very site-specific and needs to go through a master planning process, in my opinion.
Well, help us understand, I guess, EPS. This says that the requirement for a master plan will be waived. So who has the authority to waive it, and what effectively is the trigger, and what role do we play in that?
So you would be the one waiving it effectively. Because what we would be doing is when we bring back Central City 2035 and the new zoning proposals for the entire Central City, including the Clinton Station, we could be saying, we think there's enough clarity here and enough shared vision that this could be adopted. We could develop the height, the floor area ratios, the development standards now and not require a master plan process as a subsequent process, as a quasi-judicial process.
Well, so forgive whether this is a really dumb question, but why would you need an amendment to do something which theoretically you could do, you could decide to do, come to us for a waiver?
It wouldn't even be a waiver.
What does this give you that you don't have already in terms of seeking a waiver under certain circumstances?
Nothing.
Yeah, actually,
Just clarification,
now that I
yeah.
think about this, if this was a little more accurate, it would say then the requirement for a master plan would not necessarily be imposed, right? Because we're
Yes.
not going to require a master plan until this is all done. And you're saying we might not require a master plan if they get their act together beforehand.
What we've been basically, I mean, another way of saying this too would be, we want there to be a public process. We want there to be certainty on both ends of the scale on as to what's going to happen at this site. We don't want to just zone it now and hope for the best. But we want to have some ability for there to be some public review and input as how this comes together. That could either occur through the development of the final package for Central City 2035, or it can happen as a quasi-judicial process. If that doesn't happen, it'd have to happen then through a quasi-judicial process as a master plan.
Let's say a majority of the council signaled that the bar would be very high to waive this requirement. Would that discourage BPS from going down this path, or would you still want to have the discretionary right to do this?
I think the bar's high anyway. So I don't know that it makes a difference one way or the other. Perhaps I'm confused by the question.
Well, I'm just trying to address Commissioner Fritz's concern that she's apparently not comfortable taking this out of a master planning process, also wants to make sure there's adequate public process. What I'm learning is that it still is within our discretion to waive it or not. And that has to be done through a public process. But if this language is in there, we may be signaling to you that it would be that at your discretion, you'll put staff resources and go through a process and come to council with that. Am I on the right track?
You know, I believe you are. What we're really saying is that if the parties can come together with the plan between now and the time we're actually adopting the code that goes with the Central City Plan, and that plan that is developed, the more specifics for the site, can be done in a way that's acceptably public and vetted, we could just accept that based on review and based on your all sanction and based on the planning and sustainability's approval as the zoning for the site. It's almost like the need and the purposes of doing a master plan will have been satisfied. The planning and staff, and then the Planning and Sustainability Commission, and then the City Council are going to have to judge that, yeah, those, the purposes of the master plan have been met and we can accept this. If any of those bodies find this is not true, that's not going to proceed forward. You still have a master plan option down the road.
And colleagues, I remind you that when we adopted the amendment to the urban renewal area, we had a pretty intensive discussion about affordable housing at this site. I suggest that having a master plan process might allow more discussion of what kinds of uses than a purely zoning code discussion of the map amendment.
If you want to weigh in on this, Susan, I think.
I just wanted to say, this is not the only site in the central city where this exact same situation is showing up. So we have Conway, we have
Post Office, we have OMSI, we have Centennial Mill.
Right.
But those sites are all subject to master plans?
Well, they're all, at this level in the quadrant plan for the west side, it includes language that says consider and sort of go develop a master plan provision for those sites. In this plan, I believe we're calling for it in OMSI. Yes. And I believe we called for it in Blanchard already. So you've already done this in the northeast quadrant.
And that's a conditional use master plan? Or is that when we say master plan, what are we talking about?
Correct, Mayor. It's what we're talking about is inventing, it's a provision that says if you're over a certain size, and these sites are, what we really want to see is before we put the zoning down on it, sort of a master plan for how you think the site's going to develop.
What is that legally? What are we talking about? Is this a conditional use master plan that a property owner applies for? Is this a legislative document that we approve? What?
Well, the way we did it in Conway was we established sort of a zoning ceiling for what Conway could do, and set up principles in it for what the development had to accomplish, and use those in a quasi-judicial process. I don't know if it's technically a conditional use, but it was a new process that BDS, through public process, says this plan accomplishes those criteria of what you wanted to do on this, so you have access to this higher level of zoning. That's the master plan provision we've used so far. We also have a different version of that in Gateway, but it's never been used. Yeah. It's sort of, and the Conway is a good example. Generally, redevelopment of Conway site at certain levels was acceptable to the neighborhood, and we could prove that it could meet the traffic impacts. But there was still concern about how the details of that and some of the specifics would evolve. And so rather than try to do that kind of planning in the abstract, we said, this entitlement's available for that site, but the detail, the phasing, some of the other public realm improvements have to be developed before you can access that.
I know we could probably spend all afternoon on this. Let me just observe that there's a policy question about whether we would waive the master plan requirements. I also think there's a drafting problem because the way it's actually written is not how we're actually talking about it. So I would suggest that sometime later today we come back with new language that makes it clear. We may accept or reject it, but let's be clear about our intent, which is there's a limited circumstance where you could come to council to seek council approval to waive a requirement. Not that the requirement for a master plan will be waived, because that's directive.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. Let's keep going and get the rest of the amendments
Then we can debate the
explained.
policy question, but let's make sure the language has the
And
protection.
we have a lot of people queued up.
You
here
don't
to
do it
speak,
without
so.
council approval.
Let's take the other, why don't you walk us through the other two amendments?
So there's a little more than two, but we'll go through them quickly. So one is an amendment to an action item from the West Quadrant Plan. You took testimony on the West Quadrant about this, and at the time we were looking at the Morrison Bridgehead West Side, the ramps that are leading off of it to Nadeau Parkway. The suggestion was that there would be a feasibility study looking at removing or reconfiguring the ramps. PBOT has done analysis already that has shown that.
Steve's not here to answer this question, but perhaps you could just clarify. It's one thing to do a feasibility study. It's another to determine who pays for any of the work, which as I understand it, may benefit, a development that's going on there, but may not make the list of priorities for the city and its transportation. So if we're to adopt this, we're not implicitly agreeing that the city's on the hook for any portion of this other than the study. Is that correct?
True.
Okay.
That was something that the county reminded us as well, because it is their facility at this point, and they're saying that they would want to be obviously a part of this as well. So any conversation is premature about what happens there. But they have studied enough to know that removing is not it's not feasible. They need to make sure there is a connection with Nadeau Parkway from the ramp, from the bridge. So what they'd like to do is change the language, and this was worked out with the CEIC and the Portland Freight Committee to their satisfaction, to say that really we would be studying the feasibility of reconfiguring, and that we would maintain southbound freeway access from the Morrison Bridge for freight trips originating from the Central East Side.
I'm actually less concerned about stepping on the toes of our friends at the county, and more concerned that by doing an assessment, we're impliedly saying that we're prepared to fund one of the options, since I'm not entirely clear after talking to Steve that this is a city priority.
And this does not commit us to that. The next one would be, there was some language on a page of the document that was really introducing kind of at a high level some of the things the plan was going to do. And one of them was dealing with the needs to balance multimodal transportation. Just the current language was a little uncomfortable, some involved, so we've just proposed some minor tweaks to that language to make sure that it's not really setting a priority that active transportation becomes the primary mode in the district, because it is a freight district after all. Not that we're not going to still do the active transportation improvements. And then the other was that we would be adding, there's a number of streets. In most freight districts, every street's basically equal. They're all freight district streets. There may be a slight hierarchy on some main arterials, but in this district, there's a lot of other streets that have a higher need in terms of getting people north-south or east-west to the district. So what's been proposed by PBOT is the addition of a couple priority or main truck streets in the district. We wanted to add Northeast Davis to that mix. It had been overlooked in the plans. We want to add that. And then the last two amendments are some that were offered by ODOT. And they're basically really recognizing that actions to improve turn movements, left-hand turn movements northbound off of Powell into the district would need to be done, with ODOT approval, which we would obviously agree with.
So Mayor, I move 1, 2, 3, 5 through 9 as a package to place them on the table.
Okay, is there a second? Further discussion about that motion? Then a roll call on that motion, please.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Hales.
Aye.
And just to be clear, if at some point BPS comes forth with a substitute amendment 4, then the council would consider that for further action.
And
Good plan.
just to be clear, we're going to work on this during the testimony and try to bring something back today so that you could see it.
To be further clear, I have to leave at 5:15.
Got it. We may not get this all done today. We got a lot of people here. All right, let's move on. Thank you. To a panel, please, of Dan Yates, Skip Newberry, and Valeria Ramirez. Assuming they're all here. 2 out of 3, anyway.
Dan, I just have to ask you, on one of the slides we saw earlier, there was this good-looking guy sitting at a table in the back.
That was me.
Was it?
That was me.
Are you related to him? That was you, okay.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Troy Doss and Joe Zender for outstanding leadership of the Southeast Quadrant 2035 Committee. I'm excited about many of the proposed changes to the CID, but I am concerned about the details of those changes. For example, the proposed 2035 plan changes the zoning around OMSI Station for the land south of Crothers Street to EXD from heavy industrial. A group of amazing PSU grad students last week presented to me concepts for the Portland Spirit 1.5 acre parcel, and those concepts included increasing our current building square footage from 5,000 square feet up to 300,000 square feet. I asked them if they were aware of the approved Clinton Station plan that has Crothers Street, the only access road for the Opera McCoy Millwork and the Portland Spirit, reduced from its current 2 lanes with parking and full bike lanes to a single lane with super wide bike lanes from 4th to the river. They were not aware of the changes as it is not incorporated in the 2035 plan. I recently informed Troy about the Clinton Station plan impact on Crothers Street, He informed me that the Spirit, the Opera, and McCoy Land would not be able to take full advantage of the new EXD zoning if the capacity of Carruthers Street is reduced. This means the work of our committee is thwarted by a separate planning process resulting in all this land directly next to a new multi-purpose transit station blocked from reaching its full development potential. Other details that concern me including updating our 1987 Greenway Code to reflect several U.S. Supreme Court rulings, Ninth Circuit Court rulings, State of Oregon Goal 15 Greenway rules, and the Federal Marine Transportation Security Act of 2002. I am also concerned about freight movement within the CID and access to our interstate road systems. I know some think water transit is a whimsical idea, but I'm sure many of those people also believe the return of the streetcar was equally unrealistic. The river is our last available right-of-way, and as the city grows, water transit will return to Portland. We need to prepare for it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your work on this.
Just to clarify that, the concern about Crimson Street, which planning process is that in? I mean,
That was
Carruthers
in
Street?
the Clinton's station process, which I did not pay attention to because I am next to the OMSI station process. They planned Carruthers all the way to the river in that process. And I did not hear about it until I read on bikeportland.org that our street was going to be taken away from us. And then I started asking questions. And last week, or 10 days ago, when I realized that, oh my God, our development potential, I was basically told it's going to happen, put up with it. And then I found out that the amount of development on our property is so significant. How in the world am I going to support 300,000 square feet of potential development with a one-lane road? Which they're basically proposing putting no yellow line down the middle, building very wide bike lanes, and having the traffic going up and down Carruthers weave around each other.
So, but has that specific transportation design or plan been formally adopted?
Yes.
By who?
You.
Really?
Really?
From my understanding, the Clinton Street plan is, well, I've been told that it's going to.
don't think so.
Art Pierce and I have had several discussions about this, and he's told me it's going to happen.
I don't think it's been here yet. Okay.
Well,
think
there
we
are
would
transportation people in the room.
All right, we'll get clarity on that, but appreciate you
Right.
flagging it. So, thank
Absolutely,
you.
appreciate
And
it.
we've got a lot of material here. Could you just remind me, are you alluding to the marine overlay issue?
Just alluding to the fact that the Greenway Code requires unrestricted public access to property along the river, which is in direct disagreement with the actual state Greenway Code, which requires marine-related and marine-dependent users are exempt from the setback and exempt from building the trail. The Supreme Court rulings have ruled solidly against the Greenway, actually imposed certain rules for taking of the trail. The Ninth Circuit has leveled some large fines in the millions of dollars against Eugene and another city in Oregon for improperly assessing the trail or extracting the trail. And the Marine Transportation Security Act absolutely forbids unrestricted public access across a marine entity like myself. I have the last parcel in the entire city that I can operate from, which was determined by TriMet when they tried to move us for the bridge project. So if we're going to have marine commerce on our river, we need to recognize there are rules beyond the Greenway Code.
Thank you. Welcome.
Great, thanks. Mayor Hales and members of City Council, my name is Skip Newberry, President of the Technology Association of Oregon, also a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. And first want to start by thanking Troy and Joe and Susan for their work during this process and the rest of city staff as well that were involved. TAO represents about 300 tech companies, which includes both software and manufacturing in the region. One thing that I think is really important about this plan that, and is a big reason why we as an association support it, is it recognizes, I think, really well the changing nature of our economy and its connection to the employment opportunity area, specifically in this district. With a more modern definition of industry, which includes standalone software companies as well as companies that have a mix of software and manufacturing as part of what they do, they're increasingly choosing the Central East Side. And a large majority of tech workers already live on the East Side. So as companies continue to expand and they're looking for relatively affordable places that are larger for them to grow into, The Central East Side represents a great tool in our economic development toolbox to help retain those companies in the region and as they continue to grow. The extension of the rules allowing software developers alongside manufacturers in much of the district as more office space comes online, I think that's important. An issue that some of our members flagged that are located in the district is related to transportation and safety. And I think the plan does a good job of noting the issue around parking congestion as a safety issue. So use of more efficient sort of lots for off-street parking, and PDC's review of parking options is going to be important as contemplated by the plan. Also, the increasing use of pedestrians and bicycle traffic through the district and then within it. And looking at ways, as Troy alluded to help reduce the tension between freight, which is also a necessary use in the area, and some of these other increasing alternative modes of transit. And I think the plan does a good job of that as well. Finally, I just want to mention that the economic development opportunity with the Innovation District, and in particular the catalytic anchor that OMSI represents, is really huge for the region. There's few cities that have a downtown core like we do between the OMSI opportunity and Southwest Waterfront that offer such a varied array of both large sites for corporate campus relocation as well as small maker spaces and everything in between. And the connectivity from a transportation system that connects the two is phenomenal. So the fact that this contemplates in a very central way the opportunity that OMSI presents is very important, I think, for a lot of our members as they look to this region as sort of another phase of growth as tech continues to grow.
Can I just ask you one question?
Yep.
Having toured a number of those sites in the Central East Side and seen these tech companies, software folks, you remind us maybe, and many of them are refugees from other cities where they got priced out or something happened. Can you just remind us, in just roughly, what are the top 3 competitive advantages that we have right now in that sector?
Yeah, in terms of just one qualifying or clarifying question, within the tech sector or within the district, in terms of competitive advantages?
Well, the district, if it's narrow.
Yeah, I think with the district, one thing that's exciting is the older sort of warehouse spaces and the aesthetic that presents. A lot of the software folks love the sort of variety that exists within the region. And the other thing is that you have to keep in mind a lot of technology companies, especially software, are developing solutions for other markets, not for tech specifically, but for healthcare, for manufacturing, et cetera. So the closer they are to the users of the technology, that's where innovation occurs. And so to be able to have a working sort of manufacturing area with a lot of industrial uses is really intriguing because it's a potential to be close to your customer and to prototype and test. And I think as well that having spaces that can allow small batch manufacturing and prototyping is intriguing, and I know that ADX is a big player in that realm, and so those are some of the things that are really attractive. I also think that the proximity to the east side, where, as I mentioned, a lot of the tech talent lives, they have a lot of different routes into that district by bike, walking, public transit. And I think as that region grows, we'll have to be mindful of making sure those routes continue to be strong and safe.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you both very much. Okay, next panel we want to call is Susan Lindsay, Nancy Stuber, and Sue Pierce. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Welcome.
I guess I'm on.
You're on.
I'm Susan Lindsay. I'm co-chair of the Buckman Community Association. And I think I'd like to echo a lot of what Dawn had to say about this process and about the planning staff. I've been on a number of these committees over the year as a stakeholder or whatever I am, a representative really for a neighborhood. And this was a very good process. I'm just regretful that east of 12th, doesn't have that same ability to bring together the stakeholders in such a way. The planning staff, in particular, Troy and Joe, and under Susan's leadership, they really listened to members of the committee. They really did. And they went back and they made changes and they brought that back to us, you know, month after month, and we went through this. And you know, there were some strong personalities on that committee, and I might be guilty of being one of those myself. But as we, you know, move towards turning this district over to the next generation, and I think that's exactly what we're doing here. I think this plan is a compromise, and it's a good compromise. I just want to focus on a couple of things. One, I too opposed amendment number 4, which is turning into kind of a sticky wicket. So I'm seeing that you're going to discuss that further, and I agreed with Commissioner Fritz that going back to the original language is probably the simplest thing to do at this time. And second, like Co-Chair Hansen, I really want to support the green loop. And in particular, I'd like to advance the idea that, you know, that with the existing zoning, even without any change, there's a tremendous amount of potential for a lot of housing in the district. And I think, and people passing through the district all the time. And so this idea of a cohesive green loop and areas where people can be in a very park efficient area where there's going to be a lot of housing, we want to make sure that we continue to focus on a green loop. And also, I would add that it would be wonderful for those of us who have lived next to the Willamette River our entire lives and are thrilled that I've been swimming in it even when it was dirty, but now I really like to swim in it. If we could look at the idea of developing an option, especially if we have housing in the OMSI area, why don't we have some kind of a beach where people could get into the water? Because right now it's quite difficult to do that with the riprap. And finally, I would just like to say that the expansion of the EOS into the IG is going to make for a lot of changes. I mean, there's going to be a lot of retail, there's going to be a lot of increased employment, which is good, and there's going to be a lot of conflicts that are going to take place with the increased housing. And so we have to continue to kind of work together and pay attention to it and listen to the concerns like that Dan Yates just brought up about Carruthers, you know, that these property owners have been shepherding this district for decades, and they deserve to be heard as we go through these big processes, as we welcome in the next generation with their jobs and their energy and their vision of what's taking place here. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for your help. Nancy, welcome.
Mayor Hales and members of the commission, I'm Nancy Stuber, I'm the president and CEO at OMSI. And I thank you for the opportunity to present our position on the plan. We've participated in this planning process for over 3 years as a member of the CEIC, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and with the Planning and Sustainability Commission hearings. And I, too, commend the staff on the thoroughness of the process and on their tenacity. OMSI is very pleased to support the Planning Commission's recommendations to the Council. Those recommendations rezone the OMSI parcels to EX with housing. However, the housing would only be permitted as a conditional use and through a master plan process. The conditional use criteria will reflect the current conditional use criteria for housing in the EG zone, and we look forward to working with BPS as they recommend a list of conditions under the new zoning. We support this recommendation for several reasons. First, we currently have the right to build housing as a conditional use on a large area of the site that's currently zoned EG. These properties are in the OMSI station area immediately adjacent to the Telecom crossing, and so with EG zoning, the city has already determined that a limited amount of housing subject to conditions is appropriate in this location. This current residential allowance was provided by code even before the city's significant investment in the new transit infrastructure and before it developed this exciting vision for mixed use and a vibrant waterfront in the OMSI area. So the recommendation appropriately preserves OMSI's current allowance for residential conditional use. The recommendation also supports the language and intent of the Southeast Quadrant Plan to develop mixed-use, high-density, vibrant and safe station areas that complement but do not conflict with industrial operations. and to maximize the development opportunity presented by new transit to have higher employment densities and a diverse mix of uses. The recommendation delivers on these objectives by allowing for a vibrant mix of uses that will represent and respect nearby industrial uses. And then finally, the BPS recommendation leverages both that investment in the Telecom Crossing and OMSI's long history of community contribution as a major employer, an anchor business, and a public attraction in the Central East Side for more than 20 years. Conditional housing is a tool to help develop an employment district that is diverse, market-driven, and attracts investment. This is an unprecedented opportunity for the Central East Side to capitalize on all of the assets to create the signature district for the city. So we appreciate the thoughtful deliberations of the Planning Commission on this matter, and we request that the city accept their recommendation to permit EX with housing as conditional use in the OMSI area. The remainder of our comments are contained in our written testimony that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your participation. Susan, welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Pierce, the chair of the Hosford Abernathy Neighborhood Association, and my comments are representing that body. The or HAND is the, as you may know. We, as along with everyone else, appreciate the hard work of the staff and the volunteers on the SAC who worked to put together the Southeast Quadrant. I was the representative from HAND to the SAC. We have long recognized the importance of the Central East Side Industrial District, which is the Southeast Quadrant, as a place for innovation and creation of goods and services, unique within, as we heard recently from Commissioner Blumenauer, it is unique within the United States to have this type of a district in the central city. It represents jobs, and I think the gentleman in the last panel who talked about how quickly things can get from the central city to use points of use. The following headlines that I'm reading from what you have in your hands are HAND's matters of import as the nearby residential district, in not a particular order of importance. One is that there be protection for the existing homes, the older homes that have been in the industrial district since before it was an industrial district, that they be protected from the conditional use, non-use curse that makes financing for any project difficult to impossible. Next, that the EX zone or EXD zone, that happen in the Clinton Triangle, and that it would allow mixed use, mixed income, commercial and residential development. I am thoroughly confused now after the conversation about Amendment 4, but what I do want to emphasize is that HAND expects to be at the table of any discussion about how that develops. We do definitely support the idea of mixed income, mixed use in that site. There also should be open spaces and public spaces within the triangle. It was important to HAND members. We do not want to find ourselves overwhelmed or looking at our westward vision be a solid mass of brick wall. We don't want to wake up one morning and find that to be the case. That is a result of high building restrictions as well as high FAR, that suddenly there's a wall of brick. So we would ask that things be designed in the way that they were in the South Waterfront, so that there are view lines, view corridors. Am I making myself clear? The planned infrastructure project at Southeast Powell and Milwaukee, and may I say that quite some time ago I said, has anybody talked to Pete Triangle improved? However, it may also worsen an already very difficult situation in terms of safety for pedestrians and even bicycles and even automobile cross-traffic on 11th and 12th, and demands for traffic management on Southeast 11th and 12th. It's critical. We think a traffic light at Harrison is the minimum of what can be done. We have some other thoughts, and we would want to be part of any conversation about what takes place there. The concept of the Greenway is appealing to all of us. The conversation should not end about where it is and what it looks like. It's not complete. There's much to be discussed. We have some ideas that are kind of bubbling up through the neighborhood, and we want that to continue beyond the adoption of the quadrant, where, again, what it will look like and where it should, the alignment should be, and we want to be at the table. We have long supported access to the Willamette River for the multiple use, along with the preservation of natural resources and the habitat that the river provides. We also support river transit as long as those other uses can be protected. We have for years worked collaboratively with the Central East Side Industrial District, and in general, we support the comments that you received from Debbie Kitchen.
So Susan, thank you as always for thoughtful testimony and detailed. And I since we're trying to simplify things today, I want to make sure I understand one of the points that you raised about affordable housing at the Clinton Triangle. Now, Dan, would you correct me if I'm wrong, but part of that parcel is a Fire Bureau property.
Correct.
And I believe you've already either stated your intention or we've taken some action to put a covenant on that property so that it will in fact be developed as affordable housing and then would therefore be subject to the set-aside. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And that's not the entire triangle, but it's at least been decided as to the Fire Bureau portion of the triangle that in fact it will be prioritized for affordable housing.
And I think, I've said that I didn't say that earlier, but I said that in my notes, that the Central East Side urban renewal area has an 18% as opposed to the otherwise 30% set aside, and this is a good place to spend that money.
Susan, we like to say it's a floor, not a ceiling.
It's a floor, not a ceiling. That's perfect.
The set aside, so at least 18%.
At least 18%.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, let's call one more panel of 4 people, and that is Peter Stark, either Brad or Jonathan Molson, Ian Studi, and either Deborah Dunn or Pia Welch, whoever's here in each case, representing your organization.
Either Brad or Jonathan.
Either Brad or
Molson.
Jonathan, so.
It's come to that, I mean.
No, not going to get 2 for the price of 1. We're going to take one.
We'll take any member of the
one
Molson
Molson.
family. We'll let them sort it out
like that.
over the kitchen table.
All right, welcome. I think, Peter, you may be on first.
Peter Stark, I'm here representing the Central East Side Industrial Council. I'm also representing the Transportation and Parking Advisory Committee, which is the TMA for the Central East Side, and that was my role on the SAC. First of all, I thank you for taking testimony, and I also want to make sure to give an extended thank you to the planning staff, Susan, Joe, and Troy, for a momentous effort with a number of staff, including other bureaus, PBOT in particular, BES in particular. This was a lot of work. It was about 3 years of effort for many of us and a lot of time and commitment. And having said that, I want to say that this is really good work. I mean, we should really applaud what they've done. And I sit on a lot of different committees. This one was one of the most interesting. And I guess maybe I'm a little bit more outspoken than others, but I think that the end result is pretty close to where we need to be. So all of the amendments that have been proposed have actually addressed many of the concerns that those of us on the Central East Side Industrial Council have weighed in on, including the Morrison Bridge ramp. Clearly, we're concerned that we have the ability to maintain freight access from the bridge. We would add that including southbound access, northbound access is also important on the Nino Parkway, but that's implicit in the way that this thing will be designed. The language of page 3.3, item 4, talking about active transportation, I think the language is good. The amendment addresses the concern, which I think was just poorly phrased, but we didn't want to lose the priority of freight in the district by placing active transportation above it. We want to have active transportation, we just didn't want to forego the freight piece. The Green Loop is an interesting one, and I think the reason that the Central East Side spent so much time trying to get that language correct is not just that, I mean, we support the Green Loop, and so do the neighborhoods. It's to make sure that there's an opportunity to explore different ways to apply it in the district. And it may not be a single alignment. It may be that we have the pedestrian piece of it along our housing and commercial corridor where it would be appropriate, and we put the bike lane somewhere else. Maybe it's on 7th where it currently is. But if you put it all in one spot, that could have an impact on freight. We just want some flexibility to figure out how to make it work so it works successfully. A couple of other pieces noted in the CEIC letter that weren't mentioned specifically. The marine commercial overlay, I just want to mention that I strongly support the ability of the river to accommodate both freight and commerce. And I think that with the demise of the CRC, the city should be looking at maybe some kind of a system that gets Vancouver workers down to Portland and vice versa. I think would be a benefit. The marine commerce overlay could accomplish that, or some other tool to allow, more access to the river for freight and commuter service. The EXD expansion, that was also mentioned in the letter. There is concern about continuing to erode the industrial of Division Place. We can understand adding EXD around the station area, but moving farther south all the way to Powell Boulevard takes that whole area that's currently IG1, potentially with an EOS overlay away from the table, and that's in the letter. And then the accessory parking, which is something that the TPAC, my committee, is working on. We hope that there will be, some clear language, hopefully today, that will allow us to open up the ability for private parking lots and lots that are currently vacant but potential lots to use for parking. We're desperate. There's a lot of growth in the district. It's wonderful, but we're going through growing pains. And I think that it really comes down to devil in the details. I mean, we're reaching the point where we need to figure out those pieces. A couple of just final points. Road changes. Even subtle changes have a significant impact to freight. I'll give a couple examples. Taylor Avenue, or Taylor Street, there was, to accommodate the GO Block development, there was a loss of about 2 foot of lane on that street, and this went in front of council. The problem is that impact may have forced that owner to vacate that site and find another location elsewhere. So I'd like to work with Steve Novick and PBOT to see if we can maybe adjust the standards so that we try to maintain certain access rather than reducing the lanes. Another one is Taylor. That's already been mentioned by Dan Yates. And we've met with Art Pierce and his staff, and we've met with PBOT a few times. I think this plan came through when they developed the light rail alignment. I think that was part of that plan, and that's where it was overlooked, but I'm not sure. The problem is by reducing it to a single lane where traffic is trying to pass each other is a potential nightmare. And you could have, bicyclists getting hit or ongoing traffic getting hit. And if you expand to the EXD, it makes it undevelopable. So there's a conflict there, and maybe the city needs to buy some right-of-way. I mean, I don't know, but there's got to be another solution found that doesn't reduce the opportunity to develop. Troy's comments on adjacency concerns is real. And I think that this will come down to the detailing aspect. We need to protect the ability for industrial businesses to do business in the district. And I think you already mentioned when you talked to Debbie that right now just saying that there's an understanding may not be enough. We have to have authority when a complaint is raised to be able to say, yeah, but they're doing everything legally. It might be a little bit noisy, but they're allowed to do that. We're really sorry you're in an industrial district. We need something, I don't know if it's a policy, but something that allows those businesses to continue to do business. Lastly, I'd like to say that the TMA, the TPAC, has been a successful tool, and I thank council for supporting that effort and the policy to allow a TMA. And I just think that we're kind of an experiment. We're lagging behind what the Lloyd District's been able to do, but we've had a lot of successes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just on the noise issue, tomorrow, are you aware of the proposed change to the noise regulations to put EX into the commercial type zone restrictions?
No.
So there's a hearing tomorrow, and you're invited back.
Yeah. So what happens when you have EXD adjacent to an IG1?
That's a good question.
question.
That's something that we'll be talking about tomorrow.
Because you know,
I'm
if I
expecting,
could,
well, time is going by. I'm expecting it to be a first reading tomorrow that we'll have some more discussion, so you could maybe watch from home.
Thank
But
you.
I invite you to participate in that discussion because it was one of my questions about how would the proposed change affect the Central East Side. Thank you.
Who's next? Jonathan, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Hales, or Jonathan Malson. Thank you, Mayor Hales and Commissioners. I'm going to keep my comments pretty short. I want to echo what all the other previous Stakeholder Advisory Committee members have said about BPS staff. It's really been a pretty amazing process. I think we started seemingly pretty far apart, and we really came together with what I think is a pretty measured plan to expand employment opportunities in what really is an employment-centered district. And, you know, on behalf of my father and I, we've had an incredible opportunity to work in the Central East Side and develop, you know, close to 500,000 square feet in the existing employment opportunity sub-area, which is kind of why I'm up here and talking, is to kind of promote the expansion of the EOS across the district. We've seen just tremendous job growth, not only in our buildings, but in other buildings that were, you know, more or less abandoned in the district, coming in with new industries. And these are, you know, in large part, our industrial users. We have, you know, incredible companies filled with peers of mine that are, you know, creating code, building software, websites, prototyping, actual hardware. It's a really diverse array of companies that we've been able to get to know in our buildings and seen locate in adjacent buildings. And for the most part, those companies that we do business with and we come across really enjoy the kind of grittiness of the district. They don't take, they don't have issues with the adjacency of industrial users. You have a coffee shop next to Empire Rubber, which is very much an industrial user. There's a lot of, I think, you know, positive things that are happening in the district and not a lot of conflict. And I think that's evidence in what Troy said relative to, you know, the lack of, you know, kind of this exodus of industrial users out of the existing EOS. So I just wanted to, you know, emphasize, I think, the opportunity that we have with the expansion of the EOS to get more growing businesses that are really, you know, new dynamic industries, both, you know, again, digital media, software. You know, TAO is in the district now in one of our buildings. So I think it's a real opportunity to expand employment, in what really is in industrial and employment-centered district. And I also think that, you know, somewhat counter to our own interests, the expansion of the EOS is going to bring on a lot of competition for new developments in the district that honestly could drive down rents and allow the district to maintain some affordability for more traditional industrial users and makers. So I think this idea that the expansion of EOS is going to lead to a wholesale gentrification of the district is not accurate. I think it actually could allow for continued and longer-term affordability throughout the district with more supply. So,
Thank you. Thanks for articulating that argument. I know I've been weighing that one carefully myself, and I know we're going to hear from people about it. But you really believe that the expansion of supply of non-maker space, if you will allow the maker space to remain?
I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Good, thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, take me next. Just pull that microphone down a little closer to you.
Pia Welch, Vice Chair of the Portland Freight Committee. I know we're running out of time. I know you can read our letter. I want to say thanks for consideration for some of these amendments and taking into consideration our changes. I look forward to continuing to work with Troy Doss and other people as we work out a lot of the details. Carruthers Street is a safety issue. The loading and unloading, everyone talks about parking and they forget about the loading and unloading of materials and how that's done or not done. And so, again, look forward to further refining this plan.
Thank you, thanks for your help.
Sure.
Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm here today.
Button again, just push and let go.
Okay, is that working?
Not
No,
yet.
try that.
Carlo will bring in the reserves.
Try another mic.
There we go.
Another one.
Oh, I see. There we go. It was running out of power.
Guess so.
Well, hopefully we won't. Thanks for waiting for my comments. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Ian Studi. I'm the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I'm here to offer some comment from the committee. First of all, like everyone else, we really want to acknowledge the efforts of PBOT and the BPS staff. Their efforts to address, future transportation and mobility needs within the Central East Side are critical, and we see this plan as a tremendous step forward for the district. The plan as presented today largely reflects, I think, our shared vision for a future Portland where people are safe no matter what mode they choose. However, in the spirit of aligning this plan with a shared commitment towards safety, there are some there's one minor change we'd like to propose, and this is sort of house cleaning. And I think, Peter, you mentioned that the language is a little awkward to Chapter 5, Section T33. This really relates a lot also to the city's Vision Zero strategy. As presented today, T33 states that to pursue implementation actions that enhance the safety of cyclists, but that do not conflict with efficient freight mobility. Unfortunately, this statement can easily be read as directly prioritizing the movement of freight over the safety of people biking. I think we can agree that simply isn't acceptable when we're talking about prioritizing safety at every level in our city. We propose that this section be amended to read, pursue implementation actions that enhance the safety and comfort of people bicycling while avoiding impact to the essential movement of all other modes. This proposed language is identical to language that we've agreed on with the Portland Freight Committee and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee in relation to the TSP. I know this is kind of a minor kind of housekeeping issue in some ways, but it's one that's important, especially given recent conversations here at City Council. I want to underscore that we're very supportive of the Southeast Quadrant Plan as a whole. The minor change to language around transportation will bring the plan into proper alignment with our shared vision for a safer, more prosperous, and more livable city. I want to thank again the PBOT and BPS staff and members of the Planning and Sustainability Commission, as well as all the stakeholders involved. Their hard work and commitment has really resulted in an excellent plan. I also just want to add that our committee is also very supportive of the Green Loop. We've looked at it quite a bit. We'll be looking at it as this progress on the Green Loop continues. And I want to underscore that and kind of dovetail with some of what Peter mentioned. We are really excited about the opportunity of the Green Loop and open to the idea that it may be not particularly one alignment, but I also want to add that it really should be something that works in concert with a network that serves bicycle and pedestrian movement, but that the Green Loop is not necessarily the only method by which we will move people through this district. As Troy mentioned, 23% of trips by bike in the adjacent neighborhood to this area. That's phenomenal. It also is, when we look at our goals from the Bicycle Master Plan to the Sustainability Plan for the city, we know that we have a target for those numbers to go up. And this district and others around it will have to carry a great deal of that weight based on just the geography of our city. So I think we have to look very closely at the Central East Side and how it will meet our safety needs as those numbers continue to grow. Thank you.
I'll make a suggestion, because we're going to lose Commissioner Fritz, probably a quorum, and the mayor has signaled or said we're going to go to another hearing date. On what you describe as a housekeeping matter, I'd love to see that in writing, and I'd like to get some commentary from BPS on that and the stakeholders. And it sounds like we could take that up at the.
Yeah, I've started flagging issues.
And,
I know they have too, so.
I think I'd like to see the specific language and then understand how, if at all, it impacts the freight mobility piece and how it fits with our Vision Zero. But it's easier for us to do that if we have something in writing and get some commentary on that.
Certainly, yeah, happy to provide that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Okay, let's go to the sign-up sheet, please.
Okay, I believe we have 25 people left. The first three, please come on up, are Willie Lewinson, Ken Klock, and Kelly Roy. And they'll be followed by Brad Molson, Mike Redmond, and Jose Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. Go ahead, Will.
Good afternoon. Hey, guys. Nice to see you. It's been a pretty heady conversation about business and commerce today. I had a chance to look over this document, and I'm not sure who the audience is intended for, but I always find it interesting how there's a picture of the Willamette River in all these documents, and there was one page dedicated to the Willamette River waterfront, and on that page there was no discussion of access to the Willamette. So I have a lot of points that I'm going to submit that are kind of housekeeping items, just suggestions about how to make the document better in terms of how to create better access to the Willamette. I felt the central plan did a really good job of really putting intention out there to create access. And I feel like although there are some points, it isn't as pointed and directed as the central effort. And I'm hoping that we can take some of the language from that document and carry it forward and make sure there's more intention. It was great to hear the neighborhoods speak out and say they'd like to have beaches and better access to the Willamette. I guess, really want to emphasize that hopefully you guys will take the opportunity to read over the comments that we made, and so that over the last 11 years, there's been 7 planning efforts over the last 11 years related to the Willamette River. So the question is, why aren't these things happening? Why aren't there greater access? This is an opportunity to put some concrete things in this document that will hopefully allow that to happen. And there's a lot of talk about habitat in regards to the Willamette, which is awesome. But I would suggest that that should coincide with access for people, because if there's not a corresponding amount of access as there is to habitat, then less enlightened people might just trample through these areas. As it is right now, swimming is occurring in downtown Portland actively. I mean, people are swimming off the light boat dock on the south side of the Hawthorne Bridge, on the north side of the fire boat dock. They're at Audrey McCall Beach. It's happening now. So I would also emphasize that one last point is that there was a quote that said that Parks doesn't officially have a plan to address swimming, paraphrasing, and when they get a chance to do it, they'll do it. I mean, I would just say that this is happening, and there's a certain responsibility that comes with cleaning up a river to the point that you can swim in it. And one of those things is creating safe avenues for people to get into the river. So there's a lot of communication that says it's safe to get into the river, but there's no direction about how to get into it safely, and that's really important. So thanks again for looking at my comments.
Yeah, do please submit those in writing too, because as the council deliberates on the document and suggested wording changes or additions for that matter, we want to get those from you when you can, please.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much.
Welcome. Go ahead.
Yes, Ken Clock. And I guess I'm not a polished speaker, but I have some thoughts and some feelings from industrial manufacturer in the southeast area. I think there's a disconnect at the moment in the sense that a planner earlier in this meeting said that the southeast industrial area is successful in its own right today, and we want to protect that. And yet, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to another manufacturer there, and he said flat out to me, the city doesn't want us here. So I guess it doesn't really quite gel. A lot of folks have put a lot of time into this plan, and it recently received a unanimous recommendation from the Portland Planning Commission. Though to be sure, those involved to date have a vested interest in the plan. I have a manufacturing business in Southeast Industrial Sanctuary. My family has operated this business in several locations in Southeast since the 1950s. I've read the plan, it's a large document, and I've looked at the maps and the renderings, and there are a lot of good intentions there. When studying the plan, I can't escape the feeling that what I'm being told seems slightly disingenuous based on what I see. I'm told that the plan will support and strengthen the growth of existing industrial business. What I see is a considerably reduced industrial area. In fact, I see islands of industrial area that will be completely surrounded by planned housing. I am told that truck freight will move more efficiently. In fact, I see new bikeways, bike lane barriers encroaching on already diminished industrial streets, as well as a green loop 3 blocks wide that extends from the Banfield Freeway on the north to Division Street on the south, effectively splitting the industrial area in half and further hindering industry traffic. I'm told that the plan will support and strengthen the growth of industrial existing businesses. In fact, I see major challenges for any industrial business attempting to remain here. There will be complaints from new housing residents from the plan, despite the so-called disclosure waivers that they are to sign, and the city will be left to sort these complaints out. A tremendous emphasis in the plan revolves around dedicated and encroaching bike lanes and pedestrian access, and these are not compatible with industrial traffic that is moving efficiently. And it would only increase the danger for all of us. That means everybody in the whole area. The plan has many pretty renderings that I call the ghost of Southeast future. It has lofty headings advising me, advancing equity. It could be like Sunday, parks every day, and imagine. The reality is, I can't imagine an existing industrial business surviving this plan. While I'm not foolish enough to think that my testimony here actually matters, there are some basic facts that need to be addressed. May I continue?
Yeah, briefly, please, keep going, because I'm going to have a couple questions for you.
35 years ago, the city proclaimed Southeast Industrial Sanctuary and invited industry here. Our business stayed, many more came, and seemingly it was a good relationship. But now we really find out that we're not your child, we're actually a stepchild. It is a very slippery slope to consciously dilute industry in this area while trying not to dilute it too much. There are things that you don't know and honestly could never know about Southeast industry. What depth of interaction the businesses have here, what binds them together here, what encourages them to stay, what will make them leave. There's a critical mass of business required in order for industry to thrive. Other businesses you manufacture for, that manufacture for you, that provide local services or purchase materials from. There is also a critical efficiency required, whereby local businesses rely on unencumbered local street system in order to back trucks in to unload, load out, send employees out to pick up local supplies, parts, etc., and all in a timely manner. When critical mass or critical efficiently cease to exist, an industry business will relocate elsewhere, again decreasing critical mass. As I said, there are things that you do not know about Southeast industry, things that you can never understand. They're not in a book anywhere. They're dynamic. Even if you can't fully understand Southeast industry, you should attempt it. And even more importantly, allow for it. Unless, of course, what I'm being told in the plan is really an illusion.
Okay, well, I guess let me make a request instead of asking a question. It's not our intention to adopt an illusion. We're trying to deliberately adopt a plan.
Understand that.
So my request, I guess, for you, you've probably already done this, but I guess I'd ask you to do it more, is to turn around and get together with Debbie Kitchen, who chairs the Central East Side Industrial Council, and tell us what amendments you want to see in this plan to get the future that you want. Because it's not our intention to chase industry away. And so, you know, the planning, this committee of your peers and the staff have worked all these months to try to get to that point. It's an earnest effort. They may have not gotten it right, but there was nothing disingenuous about it. So now it's time to get down to words on the page and colors on the map for us over the next year of exactly what zoning should be there. And as I said earlier, I have been of two minds about whether this overlay for employment should be on the industrial zoned blocks or not. My jury is still out on that question, even though there's a recommendation. If you think we shouldn't apply the EOS overlay to the whole district, say so. And you know, that's something the council needs to hear. I guess the other thing, I don't know if you've been here in the last few years, because I don't remember if you have, sorry. But lots of times this council will have one citizen come in and say something useful and we'll change something. And we'll do it here too. So don't feel like you said something about you're not sure if your testimony would matter. Believe me, if you came here often, you would see that happen often, where one citizen comes in and says something cogent and we say, wow, that's new. And we change a document or a plan or a decision. So this is not a done deal. It is a recommendation. It's a recommendation that obviously has a lot of agreement behind it, so that has some weight. But if you have some suggestions for how we defend and maintain existing industry in the district, we want to hear them. And again, I would recommend, just for purposes of time, rather than you and I wonking out on which block should be which zoning, is spend some time with Debbie, who's the chair of your district, and say, we need this.
Well, I mean, my family's had a business there since the late 50s, and I've been working there for 45 years. And I'm 64 years old. I've never been to a city council meeting yet in my life, and I've never been in this building.
Well, welcome, and we hope you come back. And again, I'm serious about this. If you've got suggestions that you want us to change in this document,
Well, I think
there's
the
still
overriding-
time.
I think the overriding thing is, if you're serious about protecting the industrial area that's there now, everything that is done there has to be balanced with that question above it. Does this protect industry in this area that we already have?
What's the name of your business?
Clock Associates.
Pardon me?
Clock Associates.
Do you have some daughters who work with you?
I have had a daughter that's worked with me, yeah.
I thought you were here once testifying, but anyway, I echo what the mayor says.
Yeah,
We'd be interested in
do.
hearing
Let
the
us
specifics.
know what you think we should change, because it's a proposal. We're not simply here to rubber stamp something.
That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
Everything needs to be prefaced with that, if you're serious.
We are. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Kelly Roy, the owner of ADX and a member of Portland Made. Thanks for all of your work on this plan and all the staff's work on this plan. I think you're aware from some of our previous testimony that Portland Made represents over 200 makers and manufacturers. Of the 100 members that were surveyed last year, they create over 1,000 jobs and over $270 million in economic activity. And our membership has multiplied by 5 times just in the last year. So if you do the numbers, 5,000 jobs, $1 billion in economic activity. And we believe that our membership doesn't capture everything that's being made here in our amazing city. So I'm here to represent what is called the maker movement and makers. And we consider the definition of makers as people who make physical goods. They're not software developers in technology. And despite the desire of technology to be in the warehouses in the Central East Side, we need that valuable infrastructure for this growing movement in our city. They provide valuable working class, middle class jobs, and those are the types of jobs that I'd like to see the city support. We did a survey of our members, and there's a need for over 150,000 square feet of additional space for manufacturing. And they're unable to find it in the Central East Side, primarily because of real estate values being driven up. And a lot of the manufacturing space is being converted to creative office. So in that vein, we're very concerned about the employment overlay, and we actually think there should be an expansion of industrial zoning to accommodate more makers and more manufacturers because this movement is growing. So what's the maker movement? It's the legions of artisans and craftspeople and entrepreneurs and doers who are reinventing and reshaping artisanal manufacturing one handmade product at a time. It is the people who are starting businesses, developing products, honing their skills, and offering support and sharing tools and knowledge with each other. The maker movement is gaining momentum across the globe, and everyone is looking to Portland to uncover the who, what, why, and how of this critical resurgence in artisanal manufacturing. As the founder and owner of ADX, I've had the good fortune to be at the helm of this extraordinary movement. I'm actually in the midst of writing a book, which I've given you information about. So the book will be written not only about the long history of manufacturing that we have in our city, but the next generation of manufacturers who are in the Central East Side and in need of this space. So the amendment that was put in front of you that was from me and ADX was crafted by Troy Doss, and it is a good start. However, it isn't comprehensive. We need a full inventory of existing warehouses in the Central East Side. We need an inventory of the makers and manufacturers, including the number of employees that they employ, the revenue that they generate, whether they own or rent their buildings, and the amount of growth they're experiencing. Because in our surveys, we see nothing but rapid growth, increase in employment, and increases in revenue for the city. And then we also need the tools that we can use to protect and preserve the warehousing and manufacturing space in perpetuity, because it's a critical part of our local economy. So we're looking forward to working with you and staff to uncover some of those tools, but we think that the overlay zoning is a very dangerous road to go down, and it will put a lot of pressure and put a threat on Portland's growing maker movement, which is really gaining international attention.
So are you two in agreement about this?
Well, I think so. But let me pose the same question back to you that I posed to Mr. Mawson, and that is, let me play his argument back and get you to respond. He made essentially a supply side argument, if you will, that if we apply the EOS overlay to the whole district, more of the vacant properties will get developed, some of the vacant properties will get developed as creative office, and that will take some of the pressure off the remaining buildings that are used for manufacturing. Do you not believe that?
I don't see any studies that back that up. Maybe it would be helpful to engage someone like Joe Courtwright to do an economic analysis to see if that plays out. I did not see that play out in the Pearl District. I've been in Portland for over 20 years.
Pearl District got zoned CX. I mean, that's a different story. So the question is rather here, which strategy best preserves affordable space for makers? I think there's no one in the room that doesn't want to do that.
Right.
Well, maybe there is, but we don't. We want to preserve affordable space for makers. But I'm hearing two arguments. One is hang on to what you've got. If Steve was here, he would tell us who did that song. Just hang on to what you've got. And therefore, keep that industrial zoning. Don't have the EOS overlay on those buildings. And that will give the makers and manufacturers a chance to hang on because they won't get out-competed. The opposite argument is those spaces are already getting bid up, and that the best way to keep them is to release the pressure elsewhere. You're right, it's an economic question.
It's an economic question, and I don't think we have the answer. I think what we need to do first and foremost is make sure that we protect this really valuable investment that we've made as a city. That, manufacturing infrastructure does not come cheap. The amount of electrical distribution that's required, the amount of plumbing and air lines that are required, it's really hard to do that in new development and keep your costs affordable. So that's why we're requesting an inventory of existing warehouses, existing businesses, because these businesses are already being pushed out of the district, and we're losing those valuable warehouses to tech companies that want to use them as office spaces. So it's a really it's a real opportunity that we have to do a comprehensive inventory. And I know this plan has been going on for 2 years, but this movement has been rapidly growing in the past 2 years. So, and it's continuing on that trajectory. So we're just looking for those creative mechanisms for protecting and preserving industrial uses, again, to support working class jobs. A lot of tech jobs are not working class jobs, middle class jobs. We're really big proponents of supporting people who don't necessarily go to college and need employment opportunities, and manufacturing and this movement provide those types of jobs. And so we want to see that protected.
Kelly, let's assume we had the inventory. Can you give us a preview of what some of those tools are? And I know your handout alludes to at least a co-op model and some strategies for actually acquiring and holding.
Yeah.
We're pretty prescriptive around here when we talk about anti-displacement, anti-gentrification. We do that at the front end now, but we're very prescriptive. This is a little loosey-goosey. So what are the tools we're talking about, and what are the actual tools for which we have funding to implement?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, there are other people struggling with this in San Francisco and in New York. There's a handout that I gave to you about commercial land trusts that are being formed, commercial co-ops that are being formed. But we can take some hints from land trusts and land banks. We want to protect wildlands. There are mechanisms that we can put in place. And so I think we can look to some of those tools that are out there and apply them to industrial land. I think they're just now starting to be applied in that way in different cities around the country. We were fortunate enough to be a part of a national roundtable at the White House where cities from around the country were providing best practices, and many of those are in hot markets, hot real estate markets. So we're available to help with the research, come up with the tools, but we think that protecting and preserving needs to come first, and then we figure out the zoning that allows for the development of vacant land and whatnot after that. But
And you would anticipate a substantial amount of public funds to lubricate this effort to acquire and land bank?
I think it could be a combination of public and private funding, just like, we've got a lot of examples around the city where public sector and private sector come together around things that we value as a city, affordable housing being one of them. So I think we just apply some of the similar tools, but to industrial land.
Just one other question. If your worst fear was realized and there was displacement, where are makers likely to go?
Well, we see a number of makers and manufacturers have been pushed over to the Northwest Industrial District. We have seen some makers get pushed out to the suburbs, but then try to come back to the Central East Side. But we would certainly lose them in our city and all of the employees that come with it. I consider the people that are making these kind of artisanal goods a huge part of our culture as a city. They're artists first and foremost who have figured out how to develop a business and a manufacturing company out of that business. They're investing a lot of money and a lot of resources in the buildings in the Central East Side. So, I imagine they'd go to Oregon City, Gresham, other industrial areas outside of the city. But I think as many people have pointed out in previous testimonies, this is a really valuable thing that we have in our central city, and it's perfectly timed with this movement where there's a huge demand for industrial space. So we have kind of what we have existing and this opportunity to expand upon it. Another big opportunity is to make everything more visible, doing factory tours, showing the general public what's being made in our district, from Gamblin art paint to Grove Made, iPhone cases, to fashion lines like Make It Good and Nell and Mary, to food products like Olympic Provisions and distilleries. All of these are kind of manufactured items, and they need manufacturing infrastructure, so it's a really rich mix of businesses. But I would just say that the threat of this creative office use that the office overlay or employment overlay allows for more of just takes a lot of these cool warehouses out of production, and that would be a huge loss for our city.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you all.
I apologize, I have to leave. I have a family commitment.
So I think we can continue for a while with the three of us, and the two of our colleagues can review the record, so let's keep going.
The next three are Brad Molson, Mike Redmond, and Jose Gonzalez, and they'll be followed by Sarah Tunstall, Dana Hinger, and John Bollier.
Good afternoon. Go ahead, Brad.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I won't take very long, but I think I'm going to change what I was going to say. But first of all, I want to thank BPS and for all the effort and all the people who volunteered on this on the Southeast Quadrant Plan. There's a lot of people who are passionate about the city and passionate about what happens. And I guess I want to comment about the past and the future. And I think really, I think there's an evolution going on in the Central East Side as well as the greater city, as opposed to a revolution. And we know that there are districts that have quickly changed from one to another. Pearl is a great example. But I think what Kelly's referring to is the makers. There are a lot of makers who there's an absolute explosion of people designing and making things with 3D printers that occurs in more of the office setting. So I think there's really kind of a really interesting blend between industry of the past and industry of the future. And I think what Kelly tries to preserve is absolutely necessary, and we should pay attention to that. But I don't think we we still need to pay attention to where the future is and where these creative design jobs, these small manufacturing jobs are, and it's, we see these in all of our buildings. I think the most important thing I want to say about the Central East Side in particular is that we don't want to close the door on a lot of the opportunities coming there and a lot of the kind of creative firms coming there. And if you think back 10 years ago, Jonathan has pointed out to this many times that we didn't even know what an app was 10 years ago. And now apps run a lot of things. What will it be in another 10 years? So in our desire to look at what the future is, we have to keep the door open as much as we can. At the same time, we need to pay attention to the legacy businesses, the industrial businesses, including Mike over there, who we've arm wrestled many times about and listened to, and good friend. And I think coming from New York, I've watched this evolution happen where you get the changes going on in districts and neighborhoods and how they conflict and how they orchestrate and how they do this very interesting tap dance between businesses and residential and new types of businesses. I think it's just part of the evolution of the district. So the plan is great. I think the most important part is that people work to find the areas of compromise. We paid attention to trying to protect the businesses. We paid attention to trying to protect the makers. We paid attention to trying to predict what the future needs are going to be and to try to find some way of addressing most of these concerns. So thank you very much for the time and consideration. Yeah.
One thing about this process that's been striking to me is that despite the strong feelings throughout, we're at a moment where there is some consensus, grudging consensus.
Yes.
Maybe in some cases, the best kind of consensus because no one's particularly happy. But since the mayor raised the question, I want to pose it to you. What is the consequence if we scale back significantly the proposed expansion of the EOS?
I don't know. I just feel that there is a certain amount of, there's an egalitarian kind of approach to people in the district want to be able to have uniformity, have consistency, have the ability to improve their buildings. A lot of these buildings and a lot of the buildings that Kelly's referring to require a lot of upgrade to make them work. So that's part of the city has, some of the things we could certainly address is how we deal with seismic, how we deal with improvements, what triggers the expenses. And so I think that I would hate to shut the door, especially when all the stars are aligned right now. Interest rates are still low. Incredible number of businesses and individuals want to start businesses here. The Central East Side seems like one of those places where we invite people to live out their dreams a little bit.
Yeah, well, I won't respond to that, but I want to flag something for Commissioner Fish and Commissioner Saltzman. I think this discussion is a preview of some other discussions that we're going to have in the comp plan, and that is, in order to get the outcome that we want, the future that we want, the shaping of this huge wave of growth in the way we want, are we going to be more directive or more permissive than the plan has been in the past? For example, in a housing context, and Susan and I have been talking about this, right now you can build row houses in R2.5. Sometimes that happens. We might want in this plan to say you will build row houses in this zone. We haven't done that before. We've just said you could build row houses, you could build apartments, you could build, and that's kind of this issue. That if we say, if we want traditional industry, do we say, that's what we want here? Or do we allow the market, as you just articulated, that's been more of the Portland approach, is to allow the market to figure it out. The CXD zone downtown, you could build a hotel next door, you could build an office building next door, you could build a housing project next door. We care a lot about the design and we'll regulate your floor area and your density. So it's a big philosophical planning question that's going to really get to be serious on several fronts in this plan, and maybe this is the first real clear iteration of that for the council. even having already looked at the West Quadrant, I think this is raising that issue of, are we going to be very specific, or are we going to let the market play a broad role? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but there is a choice.
Well, Mayor, in light of that comment, is it your intention to potentially propose more amendments between now and the next hearing?
Yes, not necessarily my intention, but certainly to allow them.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Jose, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Jose Gonzalez. I'm an Executive Director and founder of Milagro, and I'm honored to represent the CEID Creatives, a coalition of arts and culture organizations and practitioners, artisans, and makers who have a vested interest in the future of the Central Eastside Industrial District. In May, CEID Creatives testified to the Planning and Sustainability Commission regarding concerns we had on a number of issues impacting work, affordability, environmental health, public safety, and visibility for arts and cultural activity in the area. There were some strong results coming from that meeting. One was our willingness to collaborate with the city and other bodies in addressing these issues, as well as to contribute to the aesthetic plans for the area. And the revelation, thanks to Commissioner Oxman, that arts and culture is only briefly discussed in the COMP, Southeast Quadrant, and Central City concept plans. These few mentions would seem to indicate that arts, culture, and creative activities have not been seriously addressed with much depth or adequate representation from the creative community. We can do better. For this session, we have submitted a list of process and action recommendations gathered through a series of public meetings and shared with members of the Central Eastside Industrial Council, of which we are also a member, CEID Creatives, and other interested parties. These recommendations continue and expand upon those presented before the Planning and Sustainability Commission. We envision a thriving, flourishing, creatively infused neighborhood, one that serves to elevate Portland's position as one of the leading cities in the nation for creative and maker activity. And we support the Southeast Quadrant Plan, even though it's not fully formed, but are committed to working to seeing that realized in conjunction with the other plans of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councilman. I'm Creative Woodworking, Michael Redmond. I've been here in Southeast Industrial area for 35 years. I started in '82. I started in 1,000 feet. I was a maker. I grew into a city block. And that's kind of some of what we hope some of these makers will end up doing, is that they'll incubate something, and then they'll be able to grow into their art and their craft of what they do. One of the strongest things that we are advocating for is we industrial businesses in the Central Eastside Industrial District need to have the same freight priority that we started with. We need that secured. I think you're going to see a lot of things fall into place naturally if you keep this in place. But I'm getting ticketed right now, so there's a contradiction. And this can be fixed real easy. So if we can just keep that, then you're going to see these people stay. You're going to see me stay. And you're going to see people come into the district because they can get their freight in and they can get their freight out. And please, don't make us get a permit. I never had to have a permit before. Other industrial districts don't have a permit. That would be awesome. I can just see that working. We need to be able to load and unload in the street like we always have. And that's exactly primarily what I'm saying, okay? Now, I was told by the permit department I can't have a permit on Taylor. I have 2 doors on Taylor. I can't have a permit on Salmon. I have 2 doors on Salmon. That's what your guys said to me. So can we fix this, please? Then we'll stay. And I think the reason you're hearing some people say that we are being forced out, I've never heard anybody say that they want us to leave. And I can't say that we're being forced out. But as I get cut 1,000 times by a parking meter guy, it feels that way. That can be fixed really easy. So we're in an IG1 zone. Troy, thank you for keeping it that way. Thank you for all the work that's been done. And they did listen to us because we were at all the meetings.
I brought my kids. I got 4 kids that are taking over my business. They work there. My daughter's 18. She testified here when we tried to keep the street at the width it was. But it is what it is, and we're working with Andersons, and they're doing a great job. So I think we can survive that construction next door. But with that being said, please give us some teeth to work. Don't let anybody complain when they move next door to an industrial zone. You guys could fix that. You know where you moved. Everybody else is happy. That one guy that's not happy, he gets nowhere. And move back out to the country or something.
Can I just clarify something?
Yes.
We have lots of powers, but we actually don't have the power to prevent someone from complaining.
Well, I mean, they can't legally make me move, though.
If you have an insight into that, I would want to get a consultation, because it would help me in my marriage and with my 2 teenage children. But,
You are a
and just
man.
a little insight on that, I mean, it's late, we've been here a long day. We actually have a lot of people come before us who live in the Pearl, for example, who say that there's too much noise from the bar that's in the building
But
below
they move
them,
there.
or something. And you know, from time to time, we have these discussions about what is it to live in a dense urban area, and when you bought your place, were you aware that there was a grocery store around the corner and the like? But
Yeah.
so we can't actually ban people from kvetching, but I get your point that
Yeah.
we can make sure that people understand that there are certain uses which are allowed,
There.
and with that comes accommodations, and you're
Yes.
going to get a little more noise or
And I
something.
hear-
So consider that, or maybe
Yeah.
get double pane glass, or
Yes, and I think
negotiate
that
a
in their
different deal with
building,
the
they're
landlord,
building a
whatever.
quieter next to a border of an IG-1. But the fact is that the disclosures you're coming up with, just giving it strong understanding that you know where you moved, there's a bar there, you don't like it, we're not going to make the bar move. But you did make the church stop ringing its bell. You are considering a lot of these other things. Somehow these people get heard, and then the church can't ring its bell no more. And I don't understand that. So anyway, if you could help us.
never did that.
I don't know who did that, but it did happen in Northwest. So, and then the issue with the trucking is the bikes. Okay, so I don't have a problem with the Salmon being a bike lane. The only problem I have is if they have priority over my unloading. We were there first. I was told to move there. Troy's owned it, IG1. Oh, no, I mean, everybody's understanding that we want to keep this way. So can we somehow get a priority so we can all work together, love each other? I'll move as soon as I can and let you buy, but you don't have priority. You came into my district, please, consider that. And keeping us there, that'll keep us there. I don't have to move. They tried to come and buy my building and move me to Northwest Industrial District. I tried to make it work. It can't work right now. I can't make it work. I can't afford to move, even with the costs as high as they are. So, again, that's our only problem. So I really love what you guys are doing, and I think Kelly's issues can be solved. We work for all the ADX people. They go to ADX, they learn how to do something, they come down to us, and we professionally help them take it further. And I've been working for Brad for 20 years.
By the way, can I just say, what you just said about the bikes and the traffic?
Priority.
Well, my son and I took a bike ride through your neighborhood over the weekend, and I guess I'm sorry Steve's not here, because there's some questions I'd like to put to PBOT about how we square Vision Zero, safety, and then these priority uses.
Yeah.
Because, for example, the city from time to time encourages people to go off a main thoroughfare, go on a low-impact road, because it's safer.
Yeah.
So we map it, and we stripe it.
I like it.
And we say, better to be there than to be on a high-traffic zone. So this may be a philosophical question, or maybe I think it's worthy of a bigger conversation, but does Vision Zero compel us to create a level playing field in places where we understand that one use is less useful and there are greater risks? Or does Vision Zero require us to be more creative about finding a protected route, so that bikes, which are always getting the short end of this, right, because they're exposed, as opposed to someone surrounded by 3,000 pounds of whatever, are encouraged to take a safer route? And that, as you mentioned this, I'm thinking, I'm not sure why are we even prioritizing one or the other. Why aren't we saying one is basically a truck route, and find a place that's safer for bikes, because we don't want to create those conflicts, because we know who usually gets the short end of a conflict like that. And I don't know that Vision Zero compels us to put a square peg through a round hole, but that's a conversation I think we should have.
Yeah,
Well,
we
Nick,
should.
I would hope that we would go back to when we grew up and we were told that we had to look both ways before we crossed the street. And yet today, a biker is told that he has absolute priority and he isn't looking out for himself like he could be. So I think we go back to education, and then I really don't believe you're going to stop the bikers from going down the road they want to go, and I don't have a problem with that. And I don't want to say that I don't want them on Salmon. I would like to try to make it work with everybody and look at reality, human reality. They're going to cross, they're going to go. And I would just like them to understand that like there could be signage that could say that you're entering into an industrial zone. Red painted stripe signs that say, this is a dangerous area. Go ahead, proceed without, let's educate them, proceed with caution. How about a win-win? Bring your boys on by. Would that work if there was a caution? Could it, Nick?
Maybe so, but let's not continue that discussion now, but I'm glad you got it on the table.
You've got our full attention.
Yeah, that's a good
Thank you.
point. Thank you all very much. Okay, let's take the
Next
next.
three are Sarah Tunstall, Dana Hinger, and John Bollier, and they'll be followed by Mike Leftonich.
I think we're going to lose a quorum after this panel, so we might have to continue after that, so.
Dana's not with us, so if there's another person we can add.
All right, who's the third, who's the next person? I'm sorry.
Mike Leftonich. Mike here.
Mike here.
How about Tom Roca, R-O-C-C-A? Okay.
Oh, Mike is here. All right, come on up, please. We'll take the four of you, and then I think we're going to have to continue after that because we're going to lose a quorum.
Mayor, can I just, is there someone from the Pellet family here?
I don't think so.
I was hoping to put a question on the record about the park that's being proposed.
Right,
Maybe we
well,
can do that
obviously,
before we
we're going to
break.
continue the hearing. We might want to ask them specifically to come. So, Sarah, why don't you go next?
So I'm Sarah Tunstall, co-owner of Spool Town. We're a small-run sewing factory in Southeast Industrial, and we work with 80 to 100 different clients each year. I just want to tell you the story of Spool Town a little bit, how we got into the building that we're in, and what we sort of see as the future of this plan. I think you all have done a lot of really wonderful work, and I commend you on that. My main concern is with the employment overlay, and what that would mean to a new startup small manufacturing business. So Spool Town started 4 years ago, and we started in a building of a business that we spun off from and moved into the Central East Side 2 years ago. And we really landed in the building that we were in kind of really fortuitously and by the generosity of the building owners who are blue-collar bootstrappers, and they recognized that that's what we were doing with our business and wanted to sort of give us a hand in growing our business. And I think it's one of the real reasons that we were able to get into a 5,000 square foot warehouse in inner Southeast that really needed no work to it, and we could just move right in. It had all the power that we needed. It had compressed air lines run to it. It had electrical drops for all of our machines. All of those things were really critical to us. They're things that would have been extremely expensive for us in a new build, and so we needed that kind of old warehouse space to be able to move into. And so my main concern is that the employment overlay would directly pit us against tech companies competing for the same spaces. My feeling is that there's no way that we could afford the same spaces that those tech companies can afford. I think that Skip Newberry, who was up here earlier talking about that, was really getting to the point of why those warehouses are really interesting to tech companies. There's kind of a gritty industrial feel there, which is great. It's super cool, but it is also necessary for running a manufacturing business. And those warehouses already exist, and I think it's pretty critical that we protect them and are able to maintain them for startup businesses. I think that, when I started Spool Town 4 years ago, it felt like it would be difficult to start that business. I feel like it would be really difficult now. I think that if we were competing against the same, tech companies for the same buildings, I don't know if we would be able to have a business that now, employs 18 different people and is growing 40% a year. I'll just leave it open for questions.
Thank you. Well,
Sure.
that's pretty clear. So, I mean, you obviously are in the camp that believes, and again, we're having this debate here
Right.
among ourselves, but the council as well. It's better to protect that space, in your opinion, by not allowing competition for that building.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
I'm glad you made that observation too, what you just said, because I was struck when I asked Skip to list the three three factors
Yeah.
that were compelling. His first one was aesthetics, and your first one is functionality.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that, over and over, we think about what would happen if we couldn't be in the building that we're in. You were, talking to Kelly about that a little bit earlier, and where would we go? And I think that it's a critical thing for Portland to consider as we grow is, where can you have a factory if the only people who are in those factories are tech companies and they're manufacturing software? It's not the same as manufacturing a physical product, and there are real logistical requirements for that, and they already exist. The infrastructure is already there in these warehouse spaces. Seems silly to waste the money to try and rebuild that and to try and do it at a cost that I don't think that we could afford.
Thank you, well said. John, welcome.
Thank you. Mayor Hales, City Councilman. My name is John Belier. I am the past CEO of Stacy and Whitbeck and currently chairman of the board. Our company has an office on the inner southeast side, and I live on the southeast side. I'm here today to talk about the infamous Amendment 4 that you've heard so much about today, so I'll be very brief. I know we've already talked about it quite a bit. I think all I'd like to say is that we did propose that language, but it came because the work that had been done, we thought that, overall, I mean, we support the recommended draft plan as presented, and particularly we strongly support the recommendations of the plan to include the Clinton Triangle and the Central East Side. We are the large property owner there on the Clinton Triangle. And it's just ironic that, 2 years ago, nobody was really paying attention to that property, and we've worked with the city and the other bureaus about ideas to reshape that area. And so the idea of, without the master plan, perhaps, and of course with your approval, if that should be accepted, was just something we were following out of the Conway development idea. So I think, sitting here today, listening to other public comments that have been made, if it comes down to that you want a master plan, then that's certainly something we would follow through with. It would add time to it, of course, and in the, in any business world, any development world, time is, interest rates are low, as Brad said earlier, and we'd like to be on the forefront instead of on the tail of a development opportunity. But if that's what's required, then we will do it. We have had a lot of interaction with the city already on the property there. We've come a long ways. I don't think, the idea of low-income housing, I'm not going to say it was my idea, but it was one of the ideas that I brought to the table before I heard anybody else mention it. And I'm still a big proponent of it. I think it's a great concept for that area. And it's a fascinating piece of property that, like I said, has gone overlooked for a long time. And whatever comes out of Amendment 4, if we were successful in crafting a better language, then that would be great. That's all I have to say.
Well, your situation is a little peculiar, and it merits more discussion, I think, between you and the council and the Bureau, and that is when we talk about OMSI or Conway or the Blanchard site or the post office.
Right.
Talking about a single property owner. In the case of the Clinton Triangle, we're talking about you, the city of Portland, and actually 3 or 4 other people, right? Because there's some small parcels in there as well.
Right.
So who does the master plan? I don't know the answer to that question. So we ought to talk that through and understand that when we say, to Conway, you must do a master plan, they can plan for their own property. So can OMSI. Obviously, it would be a little absurd for us to require you to plan for our property with a master plan. So I'm not quite sure how this gets resolved. I appreciate your flexibility. But this is a different situation than those others.
Okay.
I will say that your piece of property has gotten more attention from this council than any other piece of property in the city of Portland. So I'm delighted, on some level, I'm delighted to actually have you here talking about it, because it seems to be the 3rd hearing or 4th hearing where it's come up. And it has some special magical power, apparently. But the 4th Amendment that has not been yet put on the table, but what we're debating, does in the amended language suggest that if there's a clear vision, now you mentioned a moment, in the event there's a clear vision that's been embraced and comes to us for approval, do you have a sense of what that vision could be?
There
Because
are a number of issues
What do we
within-
put it this way? What is your vision for the property?
I think the simpler pieces to say, listing in order, it would be affordable housing, number 1, commercial, and some residential in that order. The property itself, we own the small triangle that's jammed up against Powell and the railroad. And the city owns the beautiful piece of property on the frontage roads. There's utilities in the way, there's not good access at Powell and 12th. I mean, there's just a lot of issues to decide before anybody can really come together with a cohesive plan. Everybody keeps asking us for a plan, but there's a lot of unknowns out there. Be discussed, vetted, and decided. And once those are worked out, then the plan, I think, becomes much easier to do.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. This one?
That's fine.
I actually have a one-page handout. Was I supposed to submit that earlier?
Sure, you can just give that to Carl. She'll give them to us. Thank you.
So I'm Mike Letnich, and I am a business and property owner. And I wanted to talk about the Green Loop, and specifically the bridge over Interstate 84. However, before getting to that, I would like to say that I do support the EOS overlay. No one wants condo towers, but this overlay seems like the just right evolution for the district. So regarding the Green Loop and the bridge, I think a lot of people are in favor of the Green Loop, so this might be a little bit redundant. But I've given you a handout that's an aerial photograph that was taken in 2007, and it shows the property that we manage highlighted in yellow and the two potential bridge locations. As a reference, highlighted in pink is where the Hasselo development is happening in the Lloyd District. We have about a dozen tenants that work in our buildings. They are a mixture, I think, a really good diversity of what the Central East Side is all about right now. We have software, we have photography, film production, and design build shops, and one of our business is also a design build business. We moved there 15 years ago and sort of became accidental developers just because we were lonely because all the buildings were vacant around us. We have roughly 300 to 400 jobs, depending on seasonality, just in the two buildings. And I want to say that roughly a quarter of those ride their bikes to work. All the bikes are stored in vertical racks inside the tenant spaces, and I figure at least 80, maybe 100 cars are not shoehorned into the streets of the Central East Side because of that. I think that we would have more commuting by bike if bike infrastructure is improved. Sure, there are diehards that will ride on busy streets with average visibility, but most people aren't going to do it if it doesn't look and feel safe. Portland is known as bike-friendly, but other cities are passing us up because they realize that it attracts young, smart people, the lifeblood of a city's future. I hesitated to say this, but I did live in New York for 4 years, from 2007 to 2011 when we were trying to start an East Coast office. And I actually commuted from Brooklyn to Manhattan daily. And I want to say that the infrastructure there has improved really quickly. There's protected lines and protected lanes and cycle tracks all over now. And that's kind of the competition that I think Portland's having with bike friendliness. Anyway, our buildings are at the south side of the proposed bridge. The city and the planning department have our full support. This is a vital underpinning and catalyst to the whole Green Loop. And we hope that it's not just in the 20-year plan, but the 5-year plan. We do realize this is an expensive investment, but so are parking garages, and in a way, so is Portland's reputation as a place where it's nice to live and work. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Well, again, I'm sorry, I think we're going to lose a quorum here, so I'm sorry we're going to have to continue this hearing. Let's take a moment, if we can, and make sure when we know that is. I think it's July 29th.
Was there an amendment to number 4 that was drafted by staff?
I think if we're going to a second hearing.
Yeah, we'll have time to look at amendments.
They'll have time to bring that
Thank you very
forward.
much. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So, yeah, I think we should make sure we know when we're going to continue the hearing to. So July 29th at 2 p.m., does that work? Okay, so again, for those of you that signed up today, obviously you'll remain signed up. Sorry that you were not able to speak today, but we'll take you first if you're here on the 29th. And we'll continue both the public hearing and then get to council discussion of potential amendments. If, by the way, those of you who haven't gotten a chance to speak yet are still here, I'll give you the same request that I did to the folks that were here, and that is if you have suggested language changes or additions or deletions or anything else, do try to get those to us in writing in advance, and that way the staff can prepare a matrix of potential amendments that the council can consider. It doesn't mean we can't consider something new that day, but it just helps keep the work organized. So if you can get recommended amendments to us in advance by getting those to the Planning Bureau, I assume to Troy Doss's attention, then the rest of us will be better prepared then.
Mayor, can I add a comment to that?
Please.
You know, it's one thing that's clear to me from today is that there's kind of a delicate balance in terms of the package that's been presented to us. And I'm getting a sense that everything's connected, as John Muir would say. So we're talking about, you know, potential changes to this plan, but we're going to have people cheer us and boo us depending on where they are and how they view the world. So what I would ask, in addition to any amendments we have from the community that to be considered, if there are any substantial amendments with respect to EOS overlay or anything else, I would hope that we would get those at least a week before the hearing, so that we also have a chance to pick up the phone and call Susan and say, help, could Joe come over and give us a little briefing, or could the team come over and give us a briefing? Because I think particularly if we're going to be making, if we're going to be making a decision at the next hearing, I would really benefit from the chance to get your feedback ahead of the hearing. So, thank you.
And I guess one more reminder, and that is this plan is adopted by resolution. It's instructions for the Planning Bureau as they continue the process of updating our proposed comprehensive plan. So actually, none of this goes into effect in terms of zoning until the final comp plan document is approved by the council. We're trying through this quadrant planning effort to resolve the policy and strategy issues at the front end, then get the zoning map to conform with all those previous decisions. But nobody's zoning actually changes as a result of the vote that we'll take probably on the 29th. All right, thank you all very much. We're recessed until tomorrow at 2 p.m.